Hey, and welcome back to another video. This is the first episode of the narrative, which takes place 3 years after the war with the Akatsuki, and Naruto is ready to gain a surprising new colleague to finally take the Chunnin examinations. Please support by liking and subscribing. Let's start the show. Naruto appeared on top of the tallest mountain near the village with Raijin in his hand. He took his arm out from around Sasuke and looked to the heavy clouds in the sky. Even though Sasuke was sightless, he tilted his head toward the heavens as well. A bolt of lightning leaped from one cloud to another. It sent out the loud crack of thunder that reverberated across the landscape. Even Kami seems to favor you. A thunderstorm is brewing just when you needed one, Sasuke said as he smiled at the clouds. That is not totally true. I'm moving those clouds with my wind to help create that thunderstorm. They are bound by my will, he said as the storm clouds rolled in the sky and grew darker. Sasuke laughed quietly to himself. So all that training wasn't for nothing. You can create lightning, you just can't control where it strikes, he said proudly. Doing this takes all my will. It wouldn't be effective when I'm fighting Kyuubi while summoning the other 4 elements and molding them into their sub-elements, he said as his unhinged brown eyes focused on the clouds. The clouds rolled and churned angrily in the night sky as a bolt of lightning hit the top of a nearby mountain. Naruto walked over to the summit and drove the blade of the sword into the earth. He stepped away from it and looked back at Sasuke. Sasuke became one with the storm and was deep in concentration. Get ready. Naruto looked over at the gleaming yellow blade of Raijin. He went through a long series of hand signs and runes appeared into air just above the sword's hilt. They turned in a slow rotation waiting to seal the lightning. It's ready, Naruto said seriously while holding up his hand in a sign to reinforce his seal, and his eyes shifted to red with 3 kamazas around their outer edge. Sasuke held up his hand to the thick stormy clouds as they broke over the land, dropping heavy sheets of rain. He held his hand for a long moment of concentration before speaking one devastating word. Kirin! He yelled to the heavens, and a single blinding bolt of lightning shot out of the clouds and hit the sword. The bolt seemed to last forever, and Naruto struggled to contain it in his seal. It arched and hissed in a thundering clap as it finally ended. The thunder echoed off the nearby mountains as Naruto hit the ground on all fours. Did it work? Sasuke said calmly. He panted a few times and said, I don't know, I can't see. That will go away shortly. What seal did you try to seal it with? Sasuke asked. When he had finally caught his breath, he said, It's one of the most powerful trap seals that was on my father's clan scroll. It's called a vortex seal. Sasuke listened carefully and could hear the sound of small bolts arching constantly. He smiled and said, I think it worked. Naruto looked over at the blurry sword and could just make out the bolts of lightning leaping off the blade. Hand me the sheath you made for it. I'll do it. The lightning doesn't hurt me, Sasuke said with his hand out. Naruto stood up and took out the ash-gray sheath while panting. Here, he said as he handed it to Sasuke. Sasuke walked over to the Raijin sword. Several bolts of lightning passed right through him and he pulled the sword free from the stone. He slowly slid the blade into the sheath and all was quiet. Your sheath is holding, I think Tintin is going to be overjoyed, Sasuke said as he looked over at him. Tintin and Tsunade were in her office waiting to hear the results on the Raijin sword. It was pouring rain outside and flashes of lightning were hitting all over the place. I'll never forgive him if he breaks it again, Tintin said worriedly. Tsunade sighed at her. The sword was already broke, Tintin. It was worthless as a weapon. Calm down, they have only been gone 20 minutes, she told her. Tintin paced around the room and threw her hands over her head. I know. I just can't stand not knowing. A loud knock at the door sounded. The Umbu guard said, Hokage, Sage Naruto and Sasuke are here to see you. Tintin raced across the room and ripped the door open. Sasuke was holding Naruto up with one of his arms over his shoulders and they both were drenched from the rain. Naruto was clearly exhausted, but held firmly onto the sword in his right hand. "Tintin," he said as he held the sword by the sheath out in front of him. He wasn't holding it directly out at her. She took the sword from him and eyed him intently for a long moment. "Naruto?" she said curiously. Water streamed down his face as a lightning bolt that hit far away lit and up the village behind him for a moment. He blinked at her, trying to focus in on her. "Naruto, why are your eyes brown instead of blue?" she asked him carefully. Naruto gave her a short laugh and hinged his eyes back to blue. "You're holding the Thunder God Raijin, and that's all you have to ask me," he said, clearly very tired. Tintin stared at the sword in her hand in disbelief. You mean it worked?" Naruto started slipping off Sasuke's shoulder and he had to catch him. He got a better grip on him and politely asked, "Tintin, if you wouldn't mind, could you please unblock the door? I have a very limited amount of time I can use my chakra to see with, and it's almost used up from having to carry him back here from on top of a mountain. Soon both of us will be blind." She stepped out of the way wearing a blank look. Sasuke made it 2 steps inside before her look became one of shock. "Wait! Naruto, you're blind," she said loudly. Sasuke continued to carry him to the couch and he said, "I can hardly see right now. You're like a dim shadow to me in a blindingly white room." Sasuke carefully set him down on the couch and sat down next to him. Naruto leaned his head back in exhaustion. Tintin worriedly looked over at Tsunade's worried look. Sasuke panted and said, "You haven't gotten any lighter since we were younger. By the way, if I end up having the same side effect as Hanabi from that jutsu you used on me, I might stop being a peaceful person just long enough to hit you with my Kirin attack a few times." Naruto laughed through his exhaustion and then cringed with pain in his head. "Ouch, my head is killing me." Tsunade got up and went over to him. She stood before him and shined a light into his eyes. "Your eyes aren't responding to light, what happened?" she asked as she continued to check him out. "Naruto used a sealing jutsu and I summoned Kirin, the thunder dragon of the skies. I tried to keep him hidden in the clouds, but I'm not sure if that went well. Kirin used his lightning on the blade for almost 10 seconds. I added my own chakra to it to make it more powerful. He used some weird sealing jutsu that made runes appear over the top of the sword and then spun in a vortex motion. After that he handed me the sheath and I sheathed the sword. He could hardly stand and I had to use all my sensory chakra to carry him back here." Sasuke said, clearly exhausted as well. The sadness was clear in Tsunade's eyes as she lifted her hand and started pouring healing chakra into his eyes. "You really used the Mijika Vortex Trapped Seal to remake the Raijin. I can't believe you go that far. I hope you know you are lucky to be alive. That jutsu almost always takes the life of the one that uses it alone. Even your father never used it by himself. It was meant to be used with 3 people at sage level," Tsunade said with sadness in her eyes. She spoke softly. "I hope you know what that seal was meant to be used for." Naruto held still while she healed him and said, "Yes, I do know what it was invented for, to seal one of the tailed beasts into a Jinchuriki." Sasuke turned over to him and gave in a sour expression. "If I had any strength left in my arms right now I'd punch you," he said, slightly annoyed. "No one said it was going to be easy, but the sword is remade," Naruto said as he tried to catch his breath. She finished healing his eyes and placed her hand over his heart. Naruto felt Tsunade's chakra entering his body. His eyes snapped open and he grabbed her wrist. "No! Don't use that jutsu on me. I'm fine. There is no need to take such a risk," he said firmly as he pushed her arm back. She smirked at him. "I guess you will just have to overpower me then. That is if you can," she said in a warning manner. Naruto could see her, but she was still blurry to him. "Mother, stop! You can't help me with that jutsu. I am already balancing 3 different kinds of chakra. If you add a 4th you are only making it harder on me," he said loudly. She flinched and turned away. Naruto released his grip on her forearm. Can you at least see now? She said, unable to look at him. Things are still a bit blurry, but I can see colors again. If you are that worried about my chakra being this low, I can dispel a few of my clones, but I was saving them for something important, he said. She hung her head and said, all this for the Raijin sword, aren't you taking too much? She was cut off as someone from behind her that crashed into Naruto on the couch. Tsunade looked up and saw the back of a Toad Clan uniform. Master, Hanabi said as she was fiercely clutching him in a hug. I had the most vivid dream about you fighting a dragon made of lightning. Are you okay? She asked, clearly emotional and worried. Naruto instinctively wrapped his arms around her as she buried her face into his shoulder. I'm fine, Hanabi. It's all over. Shouldn't you be in bed? He asked her tenderly. I was done until I had that dream that a man in white summoned that dragon and made you fight it to protect something from its lightning. She yelled into his shoulder. He stroked her back and said, I told you it was over. I'm fine. Tsunade and Tenten were stunned. Hanabi's dream was exactly what Sasuke had told them had happened. Has the connection developed to that degree? Tsunade thought soullessly. I asked the man in white to summon the dragon. Its name is Kirin. He told her. She clutched him tighter. Why would you ask this Kirin person to summon that lightning dragon? She asked him. Kirin is the dragon. I asked Sasuke to summon him. The man in white is sitting right next to me, he said while holding her. She instantly pulled her head back and looked at Sasuke. A look of horror came to her face as they reappeared in the farthest corner of the office with Naruto on his knees in front of her. Killing intent poured out of her as she held a kunai out in front of them. She was scowling at Sasuke. Sasuke sighed and looked at her with his sightless eyes before saying, Attack me if you wish, but the only one you will hurt is Naruto. Hanabi, stop. He is telling the truth, Naruto said through his blurry vision. Hanabi continued to glare at him. You summoned that and could have killed him? For what purpose? She yelled at him. Sasuke faced her and said, Because he asked me to. I know he has told you all about me, Hanabi. He has told you things that he hasn't told his closest friends, and yet you know them. You know our story, and from that you should know that I would give up my life for him if he asked for it. Calm yourself. Sasuke is not an enemy. You are no match for him, he said as her grabbed her arm that was around him. Hanabi relaxed her grip on him and put away her kunai while eyeing him. Tsunade sighed and said, Hanabi, take Naruto home. We will talk about this in the morning when he is feeling better. Yes, Tsunade-kun. Hanabi, let's go, he said as he turned around to walk out the door. He promptly walked face first into a wall with a dull thud. Ouch! He said, rubbing his face. Tenten busted up laughing while Tsunade rolled her eyes. Hanabi gave him a strange look and carefully said, Master, maybe I should let us home. Yeah, I guess that would be a good idea, he admitted while holding his aching face. Hanabi took him by the hand and slowly led him out the door, but not before throwing Sasuke one last scowl. He is going to be the death of me one of these days, Tsunade said as shook her head and turned back to Sasuke. You aren't helping the matter either, she scolded him. Sasuke sighed. At least it worked, the sword is remade. He turned to Tenten. Tenten, I thought you couldn't wait to see it and yet you haven't even looked at it, he said. She smiled and was about to unsheath it when Tsunade said, I think you should take it back to your shop to look it over. I'll send Kakashi over to help you later, as a quick second thought. Naruto could no longer sleep and opened his eyes. He looked around the blurry room. It took him several moments to focus his eyes. He could see a set of statues of mermaids in the corner of the room that were holding large jars. This isn't my room, he said as he looked down to see Hanabi was sleeping soundly on his chest and she was wearing a thin red nightgown. His eyes widened as he looked at himself. Who took my shirt off? And what am I doing in Hanabi's room? he thought as he tried to shift her off of him and sit up. Hanabi stirred and opened her eyes. "You're too noisy in the morning to go back to sleep," she said, half asleep with a sour look on her face as she pushed him back over onto the pillow. She went right back to where she was and tried to go back to sleep. "Hanabi, what am I doing in your bed?" he asked her in a warning manner. "I had to practically carry you back here from the Hokage's office last night. Don't you remember?" she said, refusing to open her eyes. Naruto struggled to remember what happened last night with his hand over his eyes and finally said, "That doesn't explain why I'm in your bed and not mine." She grinned and said, "I guess you aren't going to worry me again by going out at night without telling me. This is payback for me having to lug you all the way back home, Whiskers." Naruto got a stern look on his face and said, "Hanabi, this isn't right. What if Shizen saw us like this?" Hanabi sighed as she had given up on going back to sleep. She pushed herself up off his chest and stretched. She blinked lazily at him and said, "Then I guess you'd have another picture to put on your mantle. It's not like we haven't slept next to each other before." Her stomach growled loudly. Naruto sighed loudly and got up off the bed. "Where is my shirt?" She smiled at him innocently and said, "The better question is, where's your pants?" Naruto's eyes went wide as he looked down. He was wearing his pants. Hanabi busted up laughing. "Haha, I got you," she said as she almost fell out of the bed. "Haha, very funny," he said sarcastically as he left the room and headed off to his own room to change clothes. She looked over at her nightstand after she stopped laughing. On it was a picture of her hitting him in the head with a rock with his eyes bulging. She smiled at it. "Got you again, Whiskers," she said to herself softly. They were all eating down in the dining room as Shizen took a seat with her food. "I heard some noise this morning from upstairs. What was that all about, Hanabi?" she asked as she cut up her fried egg and took a bite. She glanced around innocently and said, "It was nothing." Naruto looked at her flatly. "What are you two going to do today?" Shizen asked. Naruto finished his bite of toast and said, "I need to stop by the hospital this morning for a checkup and then we have to go over to Tintin's shop to pick up my order. After that it's back to training for the rest of the day." Naruto was sitting in a hospital room with Hanabi waiting for Sakura to see him. "Can you see better, Master?" Hanabi said, slightly worried. "Yes, things are a little hazy far away, but it's been getting better all morning. Rest assured we will not be skipping training today," he said with a knowing look. "Hey! I only tried to play hooky once. I want to go to training," she said, slightly offended. The door clicked open and Sakura came into the room in her white medic's coat. She was carrying a clipboard and was writing on it as she approached him. "Morning, Sakura," he said as she set down her clipboard. She was wearing a huge smile, a huge fake smile. She cracked him over the head with a single thundering punch. The bed he was sitting on broke in two from the thundering strike. Naruto sat up from the floor rubbing his head. "Ouch, what was that for? You even have to ask," she said beside herself in anger. "How could you ask Sasuke to use that jutsu for you?" He continued rubbing his head as he squinted up at her. "Actually, it was his idea. Why don't you go crack him instead?" he said sarcastically. "Still, you know better. You know he'd do nearly anything for you," she said angrily. Hanabi got in between Sakura and Naruto. She stared down Sakura with a very serious look. She pushed her away from him. Sakura looked at her in shock and offense. "Let's get one thing straight right now, Sakura. He's my boyfriend and master, not your punching bag. If you ever strike my master again, you will be the one that ends up on the ground," she said as killing intent poured out of her. She gave her a short laugh and leaned on one of her knees. "If you think you're the one that can take me down, then let's go outside. I'm certainly farther on the path to becoming a sage than you are," she said as she walked out of the room. She flinched from her comment and the fire appeared in her eyes as she clenched her fist in front of her. I'm gonna teach that high and mighty Hyuga princess a lesson, she said through gritted teeth. Sakura-kun, come on, please let it go, Naruto said defensively as he tried to block the door. She easily shoved him out of the way and stormed down the hall. Ah, come on you two, he said, as he hung his head in defeat. Outside behind the hospital, Sakura dropped her medic's coat on the ground and put on a pair of black leather gloves. Hanabi got in her defensive taijutsu form and waited. Naruto waited by a tree outside, clearly unhappy about this. He suddenly perked up. You know, if Hanabi beats her, then maybe, just maybe, Sakura will think twice about her sage training, he thought to himself, and a smile appeared on his face. Alright, you little Hyuga brat, it's time you learned who is in charge around here, she said as she stared her down and cracked her knuckles. You can't be speaking about yourself, I hope. A medic that hurts her patients, what a laugh, Hanabi retorted calmly as she activated her Byakugan. Naruto walked over to the two of them and with a strained face said, I don't suppose I could talk you two out of this? They both turned to him and said at the same time, Shut up, Naruto. Naruto hung his head and grinned evilly as he popped one of his sage clones at the Hokage training ground. Naruto sighed and picked his head up. He patted Hanabi on the back over her heartstring chakra line and forced his sage chakra into her. He smiled and said, Well, good luck, Hanabi. It's been nice knowing you. She kept her calm, peaceful look and smile at Sakura. Naruto backed away from them. I'm gonna end this in one shot, you little brat, she said as she charged Hanabi. Just as she was about to hit her, Hanabi disappeared. Sakura skidded to stop herself and looked around, trying to see where she had gone. Naruto smiled at Sakura. This fight is over, he thought. Hanabi was high in the air above her and had already summoned 3 clones. Her sage mark came out on her face as she yelled. For Hanabi's 8 trigrams 64 palms. Sakura turned and looked up just to catch a glimpse of her first strike. Hanabi and the 3 clones hit. It was a barrage of strikes and she couldn't defend from, as it was 4-on-1. When it was over, she was laid out on the ground. She struggled to get into a sitting position and said through clenched teeth, How did you do that? It took you over 40 minutes last time to enter sage mode. She strained against the pain of her attack as she started trying to healing herself. Because I'm on the path to become a sage. I don't hide my self-doubt behind a bad attitude like you. Also, you can't heal yourself when you don't have any chakra you can mold, she said, still in her taijutsu form, as her 3 clones dissipated into smoke with a loud pop. Damn, she's right. I can use any of my chakra. I never expected her to be that fast, Sakura thought. You have a pretty poor way of treating your friend, comrade, patient, and village hero, she said sharply. Sakura had just gotten to a sitting position and could only look away in shame. Hanabi, stop, Naruto said genuinely. Please stop. She wouldn't have clobbered me if she didn't care. It's kind of the way she says. She cares about me. I know you may think it's weird, but that's how it's become over the years. It's still not right to use violence as a form of affection, Naruto. Nor is it right for her to strike another woman's man like that. She disrespected me when she struck you, and she disrespected Squad 7, Hanabi said while looking at Naruto. Sakura looked over at her in offense and said, You're just a Chunnin that joined the squad a month ago. What would you know of our squad? She gave her a queer look and said, Apparently a lot more than you. I'm not a Chunnin, I'm a Chunnin. Also, there is a new leader to Squad 7, in case you didn't know. She gave Naruto a confused look and said, Kakashi retired? Who's the new Jonin instructor then? Who could they even replace him with? Naruto sighed as Hanabi said, He's the one you clobbered a minute ago. That's right, it's Naruto Uzumaki, hero of the 5 nations. Sakura looked at Naruto in disbelief. That's not all. He got approval from the High Council. You just hit the future 6th Hokage. Sakura was stunned to her core. Memory after memory of Naruto saying, One day I'm gonna be Hokage, played in her mind over and over. Over 12 years worth of memory play in her mind in a few moments of him saying that. She tried to stand but fell down. Naruto, come here please, she said emotionally. He walked over to her and kneed down. She slowly wrapped her arms around his neck with tears in her eyes. She squeezed him as tightly as her weak arms could. It's finally happened after all these years to your dream of becoming Hokage. Naruto sighed with a kind look on his face as tears streamed down her face. I was going to tell you over dinner tonight about being promoted to Jonin instructor. I'm not the 6th Hokage yet. I'm only on Tsunade's possible list of successors, he told her as he held her tightly. More tears streamed down her face as she said, who could they possibly pick over you? He nodded his head slightly and said, Kakashi is the only other person on her list. Don't worry though, Tsunade isn't retiring anytime soon. Hanabi sighed. I don't like you hugging him either, but it's better than you hitting him, so I'll let it slide, she said as she looked back at the hospital to see everyone looking out the windows at them. Naruto and Hanabi were summoned to the Hokage's office a short time later. He was sitting on the ugly green sofa of the second Hokage while Tsunade checked out his eyes. She put away her light after having him do a few basic exercises with his eyes. You should be fine within another day, Tsunade said. There was a loud knock at the door and the guard outside said, Tenten is here to see you, Lady Hokage. What good timing. Send her in, Tsunade said as she returned to her chair. The door opened and Tenten was surrounded by Umbu guards. In her hand she carried a sword. She walked in and only the Umbu with a cat mask escorted her inside. The Umbu closed the door behind them and then put up the privacy seals. Tenten stood before her and said, It looks like we were successful. The sword is as good as new. She handed the sword to Tsunade. She took the sword and eyed it for a moment. She stood up and went over to Naruto. She held the sword out and said, I can't believe you three did it. Here, now you have both the Thunder God swords. You have my blessing to use it however you see fit. He took the sword with both hands and said, Thank you, Tsunade-kun. Hanabi gave him a confused look and said, Both? As in there is another one of them? Tsunade looked over at her and said, Yes, Raijin is the Thunder God. The 4th Hokage's sword is the Flying Thunder God. Naruto has them both now. Hanabi looked over at Naruto. Master, if you already had one of them, why did you want the other? She asked him. He gave her a kind look and said, Because Raijin is a lightning element sword, my father's isn't. The Flying Thunder God sword is the sword all my special kunais are based off of. She blinked at him a few times in confusion. We will talk about it another time, he told her as he stood up. It's time we went to training, he said as he reached for Hanabi's hand. Just a moment, Naruto. I need to speak with Hanabi, Tsunade said. She turned to her with a dangerous fake smile and said, You've been quite the hothead recently. I heard about your little fight with Sakura this morning. If I hear about another of these fights with a leaf ninja, then you'll be sparring with me next time. Got it, she said as her look changed to a scowl. Naruto was cringing away for Tsunade and Hanabi never flinched. She stood up calmly and said, I will not say that I'm sorry for what I did. She had no right to hit my master and treat him that way. She picked the fight, not me. I have nothing to be sorry for. Tsunade looked over at Naruto with gritted teeth and said, If you want to keep your disciple, then you had best get her out of my office, now. Naruto nearly backed into the corner from her killing intent. Rewrite. Hanabi, come on, we're going, he said nervously as he grabbed her by the hand and dashed out of the room. Tsunade went back to her chair and sat down. She sighed loudly as she pulled out an ornate scroll and set it on her desk. His students are getting just as bad as he is, she said as she turned to a very stunned Tenten. She picked up the scroll and held it out to Tenten. Congratulations, Tenten. For remaking my uncle's sword, I'm giving you this as a reward. She gave her a confused look as she walked up and took the green scroll with a golden embroidery on it. She opened it and read for a moment. The scroll slipped from her hands and clattered on the floor as her look went blank. A green dragon scroll. Kakashi took off his cat mask and smiled at her. That's right. You are now officially a Fire Nation Grandmaster Weaponsmith. Hang it in your shop with pride, he said. It's not money, but I figured you'd want this a lot more, Tsunade said kindly. Tintin was still in shock as she picked up the scroll and walked out without another word. Kakashi looked at her back as she left sourly. I figured she'd at least be a bit happier about it. She will be when she realizes it's not a dream, Tsunade said as she picked up a scroll and started back to work. A loud knock on the door stopped Kakashi from leading out the window. Lady Hokage, Sakura is here to see you, the guard said through the door. I had a feeling this was coming. Send her in, she said knowingly. The door opened and Sakura came in looking slightly tired. Tsunade crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair with a slightly annoyed look on her face. If you are her about the fight you had with Hanabi, then don't bother, I've already heard about it. I guess you already know that you shouldn't have picked a fight with her in the first place, she warned. Sakura looked at the floor sadly. I'm not here about that, I'd like to take a leave of absence from my hospital duties. Tsunade looked at her curiously and said, What for? She shifted nervously in place and still didn't make eye contact. I want to go to Marileth's swamp and take my slug sage training, if you will let me, that is. Tsunade sighed loudly and said under her breath. Damn you Naruto, that you're always making more work for me. We don't even know your animal type yet, Sakura. I can only guess what animal you are. I'm not certain that you are a slug type. Before you can even think of going there you will have to learn the summoning jutsu, and I don't really have the time to teach you right now. Sakura looked at the floor quietly. Oh, sorry for asking then, she said meekly. Tsunade got an evil twinkle in her eye and said, I do however know a master summoner that's teaching someone else how to summon right now. How about I send a message to him? He might even be able to tell you what chakra animal you are. Sakura looked at her in surprise. Please master, I'll do anything if you will ask him to train me, she begged her. Kami Tsunade, you are ruthless, aren't you? Kakashi thought as he shook his head. This is strange, this isn't one of the normal training grounds, why did Tsunade send me all the way out here? I hope she isn't getting senile, Sakura thought as she picked her way up a wood path. Summoning jutsu, she heard faintly off in the distance. She quickened her pace to see who this master summoner was. She rounded a group of trees to see none other than 400 Narutos and Hanabi. Hanabi was standing by a stream going through hand size and using the summoning jutsu. Sakura's face turned to a shocked look of dread. Kami, she's ruthless. How can I ask Naruto to teach me after Hanabi just beat me up? Erg! This makes me so mad, she thought. She stood there in anger for a moment before relaxing and sighing. Well, I did say I'd do anything, she thought in dismay as she hung her head. She picked up her head and walked over to them. Hey Naruto, I've got a scroll from Tsunade for you, she said as all the training Narutos looked over at her. The real Naruto that was watching Hanabi by the stream waved her over. Hanabi continued to train like she wasn't there. Naruto had a curious look on his face as he took the scroll. He rolled his eyes. Oh great, an assignment scroll. As if I wasn't busy enough. I guess I better get used to this as the new leader of the squad, he said as he opened the scroll. He read over it quickly and then stared at Sakura for a moment. He read over it again and stared at Sakura again. Hanabi stopped training and eyed him curiously. What is it, master? Are we going out on another mission? He shrugged as he casually scratched the back of his head. He looked over at her and said, It seems my first assignment as Squad 7's leader is to teach Sakura the summoning jutsu. Hanabi gave Sakura a disbelieving look as she went back to her training. Sakura's wore a strained look with a fake smile. Don't lose your cool, Sakura. Keep calm, she told herself. Naruto looked over at her and said, that should be simple enough. What type of animal does your chakra lean towards? Sakura gave him a strained look and said, Tsunade was hoping you could figure that out. Naruto rolled his eyes and read the entire scroll. At the bottom was a note that read, you fired her up. You handle it, leader. Naruto sighed as he walked into the clearing and bit his thumb. He went through the series of hand signs and yelled, summoning jutsu. A huge puff of smoke enveloped the training ground. After it cleared, only a single old toad was standing there. What's this all about, Naruto? Lately you have been summoning me for some rather petty reasons. I hope you have a good reason this time. Fukasaku warned him with a none-to-friendly look. It's not a petty reason this time. I need to know what animal Sakura leans towards. That's all, Naruto said with his hands out defensively. The old toad relaxed as he walked over to her and inspected her. Sakura was sweating profusely in worry as the elder toad sage looked her over. She has quite a bit of chakra and her control seems pretty good. This shouldn't be hard. Let's hope she's a toad-type animal. She looks like quite the promising student, he said as Sakura blushed slightly and looked away. The elder took out a large diagram and placed it on the ground. There were all kinds of chakra animals on it. In the center of it was the 12 main animals in a circle, and around them were all the sub-animals. Come here and place your hand in the center of the paper, child. She leaned down and set her hand in the center and asked, I'm okay. What now? He placed his small hand on top of hers and said, just run some chakra into the diagram. She closed her eyes and summoned her chakra. Normally this would have been easy, but she had a tougher time because of Hanabi's attack on her from earlier that day. 2 animals glowed on the paper. You can stop now, Sakura, he said softly. She opened her eyes as the paper stopped glowing. She looked at him questioningly. It's too bad, he said. What? What's too bad? She said desperately. The elder looked at the ground sadly and said, you're not a toad type. She sweat dropped and fell over. She stood back up instantly and grabbed onto his shoulder. Come on, tell me already, she said frantically. The elder sighed and said, your main animal is the bull, as you might have expected. Her look became sad and her hands slipped from his shoulder. I see. So I can't follow in Tsunade's footsteps then, she said in a defeated tone. On the contrary, your sub-animal is the slug. Just like Tsunade, he told her. Sakura blinked blankly at him and said, my sub-animal? The old toad nodded at her and said, that's right. The slug isn't one of the 12 main animals, it's a sub-animal. You have a choice to make. You will either need to sign the bull or the slug contract. Sakura replied. I already made my choice. I want to sign the slug con. Fukasaku held up his hand. You quite her. He placed his hand back on his walking stick and said, don't be hasty, child. I know you want to follow in Tsunade's footsteps, but do you know anything about the Bull clan? She stared at him blankly. Not really, I guess. I see, then I will teach you of the clans, he said as Naruto and Hanabi came over to them and sat down cross-legged. Sakura gave them a strange look and said, what are you two doing? Naruto gave her a curious look and then smiled while saying, when an elder takes time to teach, you should listen. He is over 800 years old and he's very wise. His greatest gift is his knowledge. Sakura gave him a very confused look. Hanabi grabbed her arm and pulled her into a sitting position. She whispered loudly into her ear. During sage training, the only breaks you get is when the elders teach you. So just sit down and shut up. She turned back to the elder with a strained smile. Sakura awkwardly adjusted herself while sitting. The 12 main animals are the 12 most powerful clans. The bull is one of the best for strength in combat, but they have their weaknesses just like any other clan. For a straight line attack, there is little doubt they are the second strongest clan. The first would be the elephant, but they take forever to make a decision on any matter. The bull clan is only great in a straight line attack, and it takes them time to recover after an attack. When they are recovering is when they are prone to a counter-attack. This is why the bull clan is one of the best for combat, but they are very weak to the agile monkey clan. The clans are, well, they are like the elements, some are strong against one clan and weak against another. But that is not important right now. Right now what is important is why Tsunade chose the Slug clan over the Bull clan when she had the same choice. Tell me, child, do you know why Tsunade chose a lesser clan when she could have chosen a stronger one? He asked her. Sakura was caught off guard by the question and only shook her head from side to side. I thought as much, he said with a sigh as he looked down. Let's look at the Slug clan. As far as physical power, they are one of the weakest. They are a support clan. They are versatile and quick to react on the battlefield. They are also one of the hardest types of clans to kill. They have the greatest regeneration abilities of all the clans and the strongest healing powers. One clan member can divide into thousands and accomplish many tasks at the same time. When they are wielded by a master like Tsunade, they can easily rival one of the main clans. Can you see now why Tsunade chose the Slug clan over the Bull clan? He asked her. Sakura was lost in thought. For what I want, I honestly think I'm actually more suited to the Bull clan. But why did my master really decide on one of the lesser clans over the main clans? Overall, it just doesn't make sense, even if Jiraiya and Orochimaru were both fast and powerful attackers. I would want to surpass them and become the strongest. The elder sighed loudly, clearly seeing she didn't understand. I know you were held back during the Fourth Ninja War. As far as a war goes, it was a fairly short one, but have you ever looked over a battlefield when your foes and your comrades' bodies laying still in death? Have you ever ceased feeling revenge at a sight of something like that? Have you ever looked into the eyes of a small child and knew that you killed their parents in a war? Did you have to live with the grief of knowing you caused countless children to starve to death in a war? I think not, Sakura. This is why the Hokage chose a lesser clan, the Slug clan. I know she seems like a rash, hot-headed woman, but in truth she is actually the kindest shinobi of her time. She chose the Slug clan because she wanted to ease the pain others and wanted to help them. He told her. She looked down in thought for a moment. She then pulled out a small red scroll and handed it to Naruto. Please unseal this, Naruto, she said with conviction in her eyes. Naruto examined the seal on the scroll and went through a series of hand signs. Unseal, he said as a giant red scroll appeared. He opened the scroll and wrote Sakura's name on the empty slot next to Tsunade's name. He looked over at her and asked, Do you know how to sign a summoning contract? Not exactly, she admitted shyly. It's a blood contract. You sign it with a handprint of blood, he told her. She stood up and cut her hand and pumped her fist a few times. She placed her hand on the contract. It glowed faintly for a moment. Naruto smiled at her and said, Good, now all you have to do is learn the summoning jutsu. It will not be easy and it takes a lot of practice to master it. If that's all you needed, Naruto, then I'll be off, Fukasaku said with a nod as he dissipated into smoke. Naruto taught her the series of hand signs and she started practicing with Hanabi by the river. After only 2 hours she was managing to summon small slugs. Hanabi was trying even harder to stay ahead of Sakura. She was summoning tadpoles that were almost toads by the end of the day. They are both doing better than I expected. Their little rivalry seems to be driving them both on, Naruto thought with a hidden smile. Okay, you two, let's call it a day, he said as all his clones popped. They were both covered in sweat and looked very tired. Sakura looked down at the 3-inch slug she had summoned and smiled at Hanabi. Hanabi looked at the almost toad she had summoned and thought, Damn, she's catching up to me a lot faster than I expected. I can't lose to her. Naruto turned to leave and Sakura said, I'll be over at your house in an hour or so. I still have to do the shopping before coming over. Hanabi looked over at her and said, There is no need for that. Shizen has already done the shopping. She has been taking over the cooking recently. Oh, I didn't know that, she said in tired surprise. Yeah, she has been doing that on her own. She's a much better cook than I am, he admitted. Sakura, Hanabi, Shizen and Naruto were eating in the dining room a short while later. So you're teaching Sakura now too? Shizen asked. Naruto nodded his head and swallowed the food he was eating. Yes. The Hokage is too busy to teach her, so she sent her to me. I was already teaching at Hanabi, so another person learning it with her isn't that hard for me. They are both progressing well, he said casually. Naruto, how long do you think it will take me to master this jutsu? Sakura asked as she was cutting up her fish. Naruto looked up in thought for a moment before looking at her. With your amount of chakra and control, you will probably get it faster than Hanabi. But this jutsu isn't an easy one to master. You need a lot of chakra to summon the bigger slugs. You will need to ask Tsunade about the slug clan later. If you want to get technical, I haven't even mastered it yet, he said. Sakura and Hanabi gave him a confused look. I still can't summon the Grand Geezer, but I can summon all the rest of the clan, he said. Grand Geezer? Who is he? Sakura asked intently. Yeah, he's the greatest of the Toad Sages. He's over 1,000 years old and nearly as big as Gamabunta. He's a little forgetful at times, and he is more of a prophet than a fighting-class toad, he told her. Hanabi eyed him carefully. Why do you think she will get this jutsu faster than me? She asked with the slightest hint of offense in her voice. Naruto looked at her casually and said, Well, when it comes to experience at using jutsu, she has a lot more than you do. She has more chakra than you as well. Right now you two are fairly evenly matched to learn it, but when it comes to pumping more chakra into the jutsu, she has an advantage over you. She carefully asked, Are you going to use that jutsu on her as well? Naruto took another bite of food and then said, No, I'm not going to use the raw chakra transfer on her. She doesn't need it. She is already a ninjutsu type and has the chakra levels of 1. You however don't. That and my limited time is the only reason I'm using it on you. Sakura gave him an odd look and said, You're still using that on her? Didn't the Hokage tell you to stop using that? He sighed and looked over at her. I don't use it recklessly like I did before. Only 1 to 2 times a day max. I'm not filling her up 40 times a day like before. She sighed and shook her head in exasperation. At least you are trying to be responsible about it. How long until Konohamaru goes back to the Monkey Clan? A few days probably. I hope Raichi has an easier time with him this time, he said. How long until you two go back as well? She asked softly with a hint of sadness. Naruto shrugged and said, I need to talk to Hayashi before we leave. I have to put in for a leave of absence with Tsunade as well. She also needs to get back to full strength. Whenever she is, we will travel to Mount Myaboku on foot as part of her Toad Sage training. She gave him a confused look and asked, Why would you need to go there by foot, and how long will that take? It is the Toad Sage Spirit Quest to go there on foot, and it takes about a month according to what Jiraiya said, he replied. A month? How long will you two be gone? She asked in surprise. Naruto thought about it while chewing his food and said, I'm not sure, but probably 3 to 6 months. Hanabi dropped her chopsticks and said, Really that long? It only took me 2 weeks to learn how to go into Sage mode. He nodded at her. Yes, that is true, but we have to build up your chakra levels and you need to master summoning as well as learn our fighting style. Sakura looked at him blankly. So that's why you have to put in a leave of absence? Yes, no one said becoming a sage was easy, he said knowingly. They finished eating and Hanabi and Shizen went to their rooms. Naruto escorted Sakura out the door. Goodbye, Sakura, he said with a wave. am Naruto about my summoning training. Who will teach me after you leave? She asked curiously. Naruto scratched the back of his head and thought. Well, as far as teaching you, you already know how to use the jutsu. You just need to keep doing it until you get better at it. As for giving you pointers, I figured you could ask Kakashi or Tsunade while I'm away, he said. She took a long moment to think before finally asking. Does your offer still stand? Naruto looked at her flatly as he crossed his arms. He sarcastically said, if you are just going to take me up on it to look in on Hanabi and me, then no. She held her hands out defensively and said, No, that's not why I was thinking of taking you up on it. She relaxed and looked down as she sighed. I was only thinking that I should learn everything I can from you before you leave again, she said honestly. Naruto relaxed and looked at her with an understanding look as he nodded. If that's your reason, then yes, my offer stands, he told her with a smile. It's not my only reason. I mean, I am 20 and still living with my parents. They can get kind of annoying at times, and have a curfew at my age is a bit ridiculous. It's a bit cramped in my small room as well, she said, slightly annoyed. Want me to help you pack? He asked her with a boyish smile. She eyed him flatly and said, Hold on, we still have some things to talk about first. If I move in with you, you have to let me pay rent. I'm not going to be some freeloader. Also, I want my own bathroom. You tend to be slob with your cleaning habits and you leave your towels on the floor. Naruto rolled his eyes and said, Come on, why do you want to pay me rent? Aren't we beyond that? She eyed him and said, I don't want to feel like I owe you or that I'm being a freeloader. He sighed again. Fine, but I get to choose the rent, he said as he thought about it for a while rubbing his chin. He hammer-fisted his palm and said, I know, since I'll be away for so long, how about your first 6 months' rent is to look after the place while I'm gone? She eyed him carefully and said, I'm still going to pay you a monetary sum on top of that. He rolled his eyes at her and said, Fine, just use it to buy food then. Also, I'll even let you turn one of the other rooms into an office if you like. She smiled at him and said, I think I'll take you up on that offer to help me move then. How about you help me tomorrow after training? He chuckled softly at her. Actually, I can have you moved in and set up in less than an hour. She looked at him in dread, and then her look changed to one of sarcasm. You know my parents would freak if you summoned that many clones. You would break all kinds of things, she said knowingly. He smiled back at her and said, I wasn't going to use clones at all. I am a lot better at sealing than you might think. She eyed him curiously and said, What were you thinking of doing? I'll seal all the things in your bedroom into a scroll and unseal them into your new room. All you will have to do is push the things like your dresser out to the wall, since your room will be bigger. We will need to take all the stuff out of your closet though, he said casually. She blinked blankly at him a few times and said, You've been planning this for a while, haven't you? He nodded his head solemnly. Yes, actually I have, or at least I always hoped anyway. Do you think your parents will be stunned if we move you in tonight? She wore a so-so look and said, I don't think it will be much of a problem. I have been telling them I've been looking for a place of my own for a while now. Naruto and Sakura came back through the gate a short while later. He was holding a small scroll in his hand and Sakura was in a foul mood. I can't believe my parents. They practically shooed me out the door, they were so happy, she said angrily as they walked up the cobblestone walkway. Don't take it to heart, Sakura. You will have all the room you need here, he reminded her. Still, I don't like how happy they were about it, she said angrily as she crossed her arms. He reached for the door and Naruto stopped. Oh, there are some things you need to know about living here, he said almost as an afterthought. Sakura got a very angrily and childish look on her face as she said, What? Don't tell me you are going to give me a curfew and crap like my parents? I moved in with you to get away from that. Naruto's look became very serious as Sakura took a step back from him. No, nothing like that. You can come and go as you please, but you can't have any visitors beyond our closest friends, he said. She gave him a flat look and said, I can date whomever I wish, Naruto. That will not stop me from that. Naruto gave her a look of almost offense as she cringed away from him. As if I would ever stop you from dating someone else. Naruto let go of his offense and shook his head in exasperation. Fine, I will show you the reason why. Then you will understand, he said as he opened the door and went inside. She timidly followed him to the door across from his bedroom. He opened it and headed down a set of stone steps with her behind him. He walked up to a large blue steel door and pulled out a midnight blue key out of his pocket. What you see down here you can never reveal to anyone. Only the High Council, myself, Hanabi and Tsunade know about this, he said. He warned her. Sakura swallowed hard and nodded her head. Naruto tuned and put the key in the door. He unlocked it and said, There is a very good reason why this compound is one of the most secure in the village. He led her down the stone hallway and into a small room with a mid-sized messy desk. He led her past the desk and into a vast open room with nothing but scroll cases and bookshelves. He looked at her very seriously and said, I am the keeper of this. I am its guardian. This is the backup archives for the Hokage Vault. In here is the jutsu for all the clans of the village. He fanned its arm out at all the scrolls and books stretched further than she could see. She looked at the room in shocked awe. She breathlessly said, Two never knew. Naruto sighed and said, I know, that's why I'll forgive your reaction to the house rules. This is the reason why you can't have company. It did hurt a bit when you thought I was trying to restrain your love life. She looked at the floor with a sarcastic face and shyly said under her breath, What love life? I don't even have time to date with how busy I've been. Honestly, the closest thing to a date I've had recently is when you come eat lunch with me. Did you say something? Naruto asked. Nothing. Can we go to see my room now? She asked, quickly changing the topic. He smiled honestly at her and said, Sure. He led her out of the basement and up to the second-floor kitchen. You can have your pick of the rooms in this wing of the house, save for the second door to the left, he said. She eyed him curiously and asked sarcastically, And what's in that room? A dragon or something? He wore a solemn face as he walked over to the door and unlocked it with the midnight blue key. Sakura followed him up to the door. The wooden door creaked slowly open at his touch. The air was very stale, like the room hadn't been opened in a very long time. Inside was a twin-size bed that looked like it had been slept in a long time ago and was never made up again. There were some old cloths on the floor that was very faded picture of the fourth Hokage and his wife on the nightstand beside the bed. Sakura looked around the room and wondered why Naruto wouldn't want her to take this room until she looked in the open closet. Inside it she could see white uniforms with the words written from the left hip to the right, should that read fourth Hokage. Sakura was stunned and stammered. So this is your parents' bedroom? She asked. He nodded his head. Yes. I left it as just the way it was when I got here. My mother's nightgown is on the floor and the picture of their wedding day is still on the nightstand. It is just the way they left it, like they could return at any time. I know you might think I'm a bit foolish keeping this room the way it is, but it's one of the few things I have left of my parents, he said sadly. I thought Hanabi was staying in their room, she said in disbelief. Naruto sighed and said, No, my father was a true shinobi right down to how he lived in his own house. My parents never lived in the master bedroom as far as I know. There was a very nasty trap put on it when I moved in. He set the house up so if an intruder managed to get inside they would likely get trapped or killed before making it to him and my mother. I had no idea a Hokage had to take such precautions, she thought in shock. Naruto pulled the door to the room closed with a loud creak. He turned and gave her a smile. I cleaned out one of the room for you to use. You can pick any of them beside this one as your bedroom, but for tonight this is the only clean one. He went across the hall and opened a 20 feet square room with nothing inside of it. The carpet was a light tan color and the curtains were blue. He set the scroll in the center of the floor and went through a series of unsigned before saying, "Unseal!" All over her thing. Appeared just as they were her bedroom. Except for all the things hanging on her walls. The room was much bigger than hers and all the things on the walls appeared into the thin air. They crashed to floor with the sound of breaking glass as picture frames hit the floor. Naruto put his head in his hands as Sakura shook her fist at his back in anger. Sakura relaxed suddenly and walked up to him from behind. She wrapped him in a hug from behind and honestly said, "Thanks for letting me move in." Naruto struggled slightly to turn around and hugged her back before saying, "Thanks for moving in." Naruto helped her arrange some of her things and then turned to the door. "I keep a clone in the downstairs kitchen if you need anything. Feel free to ask if you need a hand," he said. "I think I'm good right now. Good night," Sakura said with a smile while sitting on her bed. "Good night," he said and left the room, closing the door behind him. He leaned up against the wall outside of her room and sighed. I guess it would be better in the long run to let her know where she stands in this household, he thought as he summoned a single clone that went downstairs. He yawned loudly as he stretched and walked down to the last room at the other wing of the house on the second floor. He slowly opened the double doors with a lotus carved into them. Hanabi was sleeping with the book he let her borrow hanging lazily in her hands. "I bet you're going to be happy in the morning. You are going to wake up in my arms for the second night in a row," he thought as took his shirt off and climbed into bed with her. He wrapped his arms around her curvy frame as she pulled him in closer in her sleep. "I wonder if she knows that she is tempting me more than her sister even did right now," he thought as he kissed her on the cheek and went to sleep. Sakura woke up early to make breakfast. She finished setting the table and smiled. "Now all I have to do is wake everyone up," she thought happily. She went to Naruto's room and knocked the door. "Naruto, breakfast is ready," she said in a musical tone as looked through the open door. Naruto wasn't in his room. "I guess he is out training, knowing him," she thought casual as she went upstairs to wake up Hanabi. Naruto and Hanabi were sleeping soundly in each other's arms as Sakura knocked lightly on the door. "Hanabi, I made breakfast. Come down when you are ready," she said loudly. Hanabi stirred slight and snuggled up to Naruto. She buried her face into his neck. "Hanabi?" Sakura said in confusion as she opened the door. She saw Naruto sleeping on his back wearing no shirt and the rest of him was covered by the blanket. He was in the middle of the bed with Hanabi's arms and legs wrapped around him from his right side. Hanabi was wearing a yellow silk nightgown that was low cut in the front and back. Her face was right up against his neck. Sakura's face went back with shock, but quickly. She looked at them curiously. Naruto is up to something. Hanabi is a noble, there is no way he would be foolish enough to do this kind of thing with her all the time, she thought. She smiled at them. "I see, he is testing me. Well, we will see about that. What would Kakashi do to move this situation into his favor?" She grinned evilly as she quietly dug through her belt pouch. She pulled out a camera and lined up a shot for a picture. Fried fish. That is always my favorite after training," she said in a dreaming stupor as she bit the closest thing to her, that just happened to be Naruto's neck. Naruto's eyes snapped open in pain as a click from Sakura's camera went off. "Ouch! Hanabi, let go!" He yelled at her, but she didn't wake up and bit him even hard. He grabbed a pillow and started beating her in the head with it. After a long moment she finally let him go. He covered this throbbing neck with his hand as she struggled up on all fours while straddling him. The low-cut yellow nightgown she was wearing showed Naruto her bare chest from her position. He blushed deeply even through his pain as she blinked sleepily at him and said, I love dreams like these even more than dreams of eating. I can do anything to you and you don't get mad." she said, clearly thinking it was a dream. She wrapped her arms around the stunned Naruto's neck and pushed her body against his. She pulled his head into a passionate kiss that he was too stunned to resist as another click came from Sakura's camera. When he came to his senses, he struggled to pull Hanabi off of him. He forced her lips away from him with a loud pop as he broke the suction she had on him. He held her at bay by the shoulders while he panted to catch his breath. She finally started to wake. She rubbed the sleep out of her eyes while sitting on his thighs. "Master, what are you doing in my room?" she said as she blinked at him, trying to focus her eyes. Then she looked up in confusion and sleepily said, "Never mind, I don't care that you are in my room. I like sleeping next to you." She broke his hold on her shoulders and lay back down on his bare chest as Sakura's camera went off again. She quickly dozed off to sleep again as Naruto turned and gave Sakura a "save me" look. Sakura smiled innocently at him and turned away with her new pictures. Sakura was supposed to get mad, show her true colors. "Kami, how did everything go this wrong?" Naruto thought in dismay. It was a warm morning day and the sky was a clear blue without a cloud in it as they set out to the training grounds. Naruto was walking in front of them in a defeated mood with his shoulders slumped. Hanabi was looking innocently at Sakura while blushing. Sakura was smiling at her and quietly said, "Wait until I get them developed. I can't wait for you to see the look on his face when you bit him. It was so funny." Hanabi blushed harder and looked down. "Two didn't know that was the real him. I thought I was dreaming," she said shyly. Sakura's smile got bigger. "I kind of figured that," she said with a knowing look. Hanabi looked over at her after a long moment and said, "Why did you show up so early to make breakfast?" She looked over at her curiously and said, "I guess you haven't heard yet. I moved in last night. I'm renting a room at the other end of the house on the second floor from your bedroom." Her look flattened out as she carefully eyed Sakura. Sakura gave her a kind look and honestly said, "Don't worry. I'm not going to mess with you two or get in your way. I trust you and Naruto. I just needed a place to move into." Hanabi dropped her scrutinizing gaze and replaced it with a curious one. "Why here of all places though? You should make plenty of money from your job at the hospital," she asked, clearly not overly happy about it. Sakura leaned back and looked to the sky. "You know the village is still rebuilding from the war. It's mostly back to the way it was before, but it's hard to find a place of my own. New houses that get built go to larger families first. There really aren't many that go to a single person yet. That's why I've been living with my parents for so long. I just needed more room and decided to take him up on his offer from long ago," she said honestly. Hanabi looked at her carefully. "So you will not interfere with our relationship?" she questioned her. Sakura's eyes shifted back and forth as she put her hand to Hanabi's ear. "About part of our training, I'm going to be saving some of my chakra back. I'd like to handle the medical ninjutsu. Naruto is a medic, but he's well sloppy sometimes. Nothing beyond that though," she whispered. Hanabi nodded her head and said, "Then it's a truce. I will not complain about you staying with us and you will not mess with our relationship." Sakura smiled at her and said, "Agreed, but can we make an exception for taking pictures to pick on him with? I'm starting to see why Kakashi loves it so much." Hanabi smiled back at her and said, "Okay, as long as none of them show me in an indecent light." They both laughed. When they stopped laughing a moment later, Hanabi honestly said, "I think it will be nice to have a female friend outside of my clan, even if it is only for a few days." Sakura gave her a wondering look and asked, "You don't have any female friends?" Hanabi glanced over at her as they walked and said, "No, I was homeschooled. I didn't go to the ninja academy. I had to train an extra 2 years as the heiress of the Hyuga clan. I could only leave the compound with a guard of Jonin level. It wasn't until I was placed on Squad 7 that I got a chance to make friends with people outside of my clan." Sakura blinked at her in surprise and said, "Really? It sounds like being an heiress and training at home was pretty rough." Hanabi shrugged and said, "Yes, it was, but it is nothing compared to sage training." Sakura suddenly became shy as she pointed her two pointer fingers together. "What is sage training like?" she asked curiously. Hanabi took a long moment as she looked up and thought. "It is the hardest training I could have ever imagined. We train from sunrise to sunset every day. Even when we do take a break to rest, either he or one of the elder sages is feeding me knowledge as fast as I can grasp it. I still have so much to learn," she said honestly. Sakura wore a strained look. "But what exactly did your training consist of?" she asked carefully, clearly dreading what she was getting herself into. "Everything. Taijutsu, ninjutsu, chakra control, elemental theory, learning a new fighting style, and jutsus. I can't go into too much detail because the Toad clan's laws forbid me from telling people outside of our clan," she said clearly, regretfully she couldn't tell her more. Sakura gave her an understanding nod and said, "So it's really that hard?" Hanabi replied, "Yes, but if you have faith in yourself you will succeed." Sakura shifted uncomfortably and she said, "How do you have so much faith? Weren't you worried about turning into a stone toad?" She eyed her carefully and said, "I didn't know you that knew about that." "No, I was never scared of failing. Naruto and the elder sages were watching over me at all times. It wasn't as dangerous as you might think." Sakura breathed a sigh of relief after hearing her words. "Don't get me wrong, the training was hell and it was dangerous, but it was worth it," she said with a shy smile. Sakura looked at her intently and said, "How so?" Hanabi blushed slightly and said, "The elder's hut where we stayed was fairly small. We slept right next to each other and Naruto is a clingy sleeper. I got to wake up in his arms almost every morning." Sakura covered her mouth and laughed slightly. "Hanabi, you are a bit devious." Hanabi shrugged casually and said, "I took my perks where I found them. The training was hard, but knowing that I would likely wake up in his arms helped me keep going when I wanted to quit." Sakura got an evil look on her face and said, "So this morning wasn't the first time you two slept in the same bed?" She shook her head casually and said, "No, far from it. He actually slept with me the night before as well, but that was my doing." Sakura was intensely curious for more details and said, "You're doing that, how so?" "After he finished sealing the lightning into Raijin, he was more tired than I've ever seen him. I had to practically carry him back to the house. As you know, he couldn't see, so I led him to my bedroom instead of his," she said and smiled. Sakura grinned at her and said, "You really do take your perks when you find them." Hanabi got a slightly annoyed look as she looked up the road at his back. "That and he was heavy. He owed me, so I took my favor from him," she said deviously. Sakura laughed at her. "I can see how she has such a hold on him now. She really does have her ways of keeping him in check. To think this little girl can control Naruto in such a way, they really are a good match even if they are only supposed to be pretending," she thought. Hanabi looked over at her with a knowing expression and said, "Besides, I'm sure you took your share of favors when you dated him as well." "Hell yeah, we did!" Inner Sakura yelled inside her head. Sakura shyly looked away to hide her blushing cheeks. "Yeah, point two, guess I took a few," she said shyly. Hanabi smiled and said, "I may not know a lot about relationships as this is my first one, but Naruto is very shy when it comes to progress. I really have to scheme sometimes to get what I want at times. I have to be careful though, I don't want to hurt him or get yelled at." Sakura was clearly seeing that their relationship wasn't just a pretend one, at least from Hanabi's point of view. Sakura's face suddenly became very sad as she struggled within herself for a long moment. She took a deep breath as she decided to tell her something. "Hanabi," she said seriously. Hanabi stopped walking and turned to her. "There is something you need to know about Naruto. It's not my place to tell you this actually, and I wouldn't if you were an heiress," Sakura said seriously. Hanabi smiled at her and said, I already know. Sakura shook her head back and forth and said, No, you don't know. Naruto. He can't. Hanabi finished the sentences for her. Have children, I know. Sakura was stunned at her casual reaction as her mind started to race. But then you can't end up together. You have your clan duties, she said in shock. There is always hope, Sakura, she said without the slightest flicker of doubt in her eyes. Sakura nearly had to take a step back from the amount of faith she saw in her eyes. You sound like you've already confessed to him or something, but you couldn't have done something like that, she said in disbelief while wearing a strained smile. She looked at her with her doubtless eyes and said, That's because I have already confessed my love to him. Sakura looked like she had lost her soul from shock. How can she just come out and say it like that? She said it so matter-of-fact like. She wasn't afraid at all to tell me that. She said it like I asked her what she had for breakfast. She thought as her mind began to race again. Why? Why did you do that when you know the risk? I just don't understand, Sakura asked in a very lost manner while she gazed at her in confusion. Hanabi turned and looked out to the sky. The life I want is a sliver of hope. It may be 1,000 to 1 long shot, but there is still hope. I know all the risks of my actions. I'm taking that bet and betting it all on Naruto, she said with absolute faith in him. Sakura turned away from her in disbelief. Only Naruto himself has faith that strong, how could Hanabi suddenly have it too? She thought as she clutched her elbows and turned away from her. She closed her eyes and went to a place in her mind that she had seen many times. It was a huge growing mountain. Everyone that knew Naruto was trying to climb it as it constantly grew higher. On the very top of it stood Naruto gazing out over the entire world. The determination and faith he had in himself shined so brightly in his eyes that it even rivaled Kami. Even the Hokage was beneath him, trying to be the one that reached the top and stood next to him as his true equal. The place next to him was always bare in her mind. No one ever reached the top to stand next to him, but this time someone was there. Hanabi was standing next to him at great risk to herself. She had become the one to stand next to him. Where in his eyes he shined godlike determination and faith, her eyes shined with the love she had for him. She must know that if Naruto dies, his mountain will crumble and the person standing beside him will fall the farthest. I could never be as brave as she is, Sakura thought as she was truly humbled by Hanabi's words. Sakura? Hanabi said slowly. Sakura shook her head to clear away her thought. Sorry, I was just caught off guard by you being so forthright about your feelings for him, she said honestly. Hanabi shrugged and said, Why should I hide my feelings for him? You know I never set out to become a sage. I never had dreams or aspirations like that. Sakura gave her a very confused look and said, Then why are you trying so hard to become a sage now? Hanabi started walking as Sakura walked up to her side. Because that is what Naruto needs. He needs a disciple. I'd do anything for him, so that's what I'm trying to become for him, she stated calmly. She eyed her carefully and said, You are willing to risk your life by going through sage training just for him? It's because of him that I've made it so far in my sage training, Sakura. Do you know what I was thinking that day in the Chunnin exams when I finally broke through into sage mode? She asked her. Sakura was caught off guard by the question and nervously said, No, what was it? Hanabi continued to walk as Sakura got a curious and longing look on her face. I saw the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. I saw Naruto sitting on top of a giant stone toad with a waterfall of oil behind him. The oil is death to anyone that touches it that can't control sage chakra. Every facet of his bare skin was covered in it, and he was surrounded in a huge sphere of golden sage chakra. My only thoughts and desires in that moment is that I want to sit on that stone toad with him, she said with conviction burning in her eyes. Sakura stared at her blankly and said under her breath, It's just like the way she was on the mountain in my mind. Naruto yelled from farther up the street. Hey, you two, come on. You are falling behind. Coming, master. Hanabi yelled back as she started running up to him. Sakura shook her head, trying to process everything that happened, and ran after them. Hanabi, there is something very different about you, she thought. They reached the training grounds and Naruto summoned his normal 400 clones. Hanabi and Sakura continued their little rivalry in their training. They trained until just after high noon when Naruto looked up from the scroll he was reading and said, "Okay, that is enough for now, let's go get lunch." Hanabi and Sakura were both panting and sweaty. Damn! Her toad is still bigger than my slug. I thought Naruto said I would get this faster than her, she thought to herself. Hanabi looked over at her and said, "You're getting better. You may overtake me learning this jutsu, but I'm not giving up my lead willingly." Sakura smiled at her and she smiled back. They arrived at Ichiraku Ramen a short while later. Hanabi wasn't in the greatest of moods, being forced to eat ramen again as they took their seats. She muttered loudly, "I hate it when I get outvoted and have to eat ramen." Ichiraku came up with a notepad and pen in hand. "What will?" He stopped in mid-sentence as his eyes locked onto the large red bite mark on Naruto's neck. "Naruto, what's on your neck?" he asked curiously. "Ah, Kami, I forgot to henge the bite mark. I've been walking around the whole village with it. Strangely enough, no one gave me any weird looks, they all just smiled at me," he thought, and then looked over at Hanabi flatly. She looked down in embarrassment as he said, "This morning Hanabi couldn't wait for breakfast and took a bite out of me instead." Hanabi shrank back in her seat as Sakura laughed. The ramen master wore a strained smile as he strangely put a frying pan on the counter in easy reach. He turned directly to Hanabi and said, "Hanabi, what you like to order?" Naruto and Sakura both laughed at him taking her order first as she went flush with embarrassment. Someone lifted the overhanging curtain and took a seat next to Hanabi. "Hello everyone," Sai said with a smile. "Congratulations on making Chunnin, Hanabi, and to you as well Naruto for making Jonin instructor." Sakura looked at Sai with a very put-out look and angrily said, "Hey, how do you know about that when I had to find out the hard way?" He gave her a queer look and held up a newspaper. On the front of it was a picture of Hanabi using her 8 trigrams 64 palms move on Konohamaru. "Because it's in the national news release," he said while tapping his finger on the paper. "What? Let me see," Sakura said as Sai handed her the paper. Nearly everything about the Chunnin exams was in the paper, as well as a list of everyone that made Chunnin. There wasn't a word about Konohamaru's red chakra. Sakura read down the list of names and while pointing at a name she said, "Look Naruto, Moegi made Chunnin as well." He looked over at the paper and smiled. "I bet Ebisu is quite happy. There is a whole article on you and another about you, Hanabi and Konohamaru being student and master." She looked through the article and then looked over at Naruto in shock. "You didn't tell me the 5 Kages voted personally on you to give you the rank of Jonin instructor," she yelled at him in shock. Naruto scratched the back of his head innocently. "It seems I forgot to tell you that." "Sorry," he said apologetically. Ichiraku turned back around from making ramen and said, "Well, it seems all of Squad 7 is eating lunch here today. What will you have?" Sai ordered a bowl and Hanabi said, "All of Squad 7. Hey, I've seen your picture in Naruto's living room," she said while pointing at Sai. Naruto slapped himself in the forehead and said, "Oh, I'm sorry Hanabi. I totally forgot you two haven't met yet. This is Sai." Her eyes lit up and she asked while pointing at him, "The one that painted your fox statue that is outside your house?" Sai smiled at her and said, "Oh, you have seen my work? How did you like it?" She looked at him flatly and said, "It scared the hell out of me. Twice." They all laughed, even Hanabi. "Well, that's some compliment." "Thank you," he said honestly. They got their orders a short while later. Sai was showing Hanabi some of his minor jutsus. "Hey Sai, what is your ninja rank?" "Me and Sakura are Chunin, Naruto is a Jonin, but I don't know your rank." She asked him curiously. This is not a squad to get caught up in ranks, he said as he smiled at her. I can't tell you my true rank, but it's in between Jonin and Jonin instructor. She shot him a puzzled look and asked. In between Jonin and Jonin instructor? I thought instructor was just a job for a Jonin. Kakashi spoke from the end seat and said. No, Hanabi. You're a noble and you didn't know this already? I'm surprised about that. Hanabi blinked over at him. Kami, when did he get here? I didn't even feel his presence and I still have some sage chakra in me. She thought in surprise. Kakashi continued. The ninja ranks are as follows. Civilian, Academy Student, Jinin, Chunnin, Special Jonin, Jonin, Jonin Instructor or Jonin Squad Leader, Jonin Commander, High Council, and finally Hokage. Note that only Jinin and up are considered ninja. She looked at him in confusion and said. Then why can't Sai tell me his rank? Kakashi gave her a disappointed look and said. Just think about why a ninja couldn't give you his true rank. Just from him saying that you should be able to understand why. She thought hard for a moment and then her eyes lit up. He's an Umbu then. Kakashi nodded his head and said. Very good, Hanabi. Now that you are a Chunin, you are eligible to get Umbu request and mission. She looked at him in disbelief and said. Really? I might have to go on Umbu missions? But the Umbu are the best of the best. How could they even consider me? He looked at her carefully and said. You don't feel you're ready for Umbu missions yet? Didn't. You defeat Konohamaru in the Chunin exams when he had more chakra than even the Hokage, cursed chakra at that, but chakra all the same. Aren't you well on your way to becoming a sage and you can already enter the pinnacle fighting state in the ninja world, sage mode. You have received training by the hero of the 5 nations. You are the heiress of the Hyuga clan and are easily in the top 2 of your generation at using the gentle fist. Can't you see why the leader of the Umbu Black Ops might want to throw a mission or 2 your way? Hanabi wore a look of dread as she stammered. Madame and Konohamaru worked together to dispel the red chakra before we fought. I'm not combat proficient at Sage mode and Naruto isn't done training me. Oh, so you truly feel you aren't ready yet? Kakashi said with a serious look. She looked down and shook her head. I want to finish my training before even considering taking on missions on that level. She said worriedly. Kakashi smiled at her and said. Fine then, I won't send you on any. He turned back around and started reading his book. She looked at him curiously while the rest of them watched her. Hey wait, what is your rank, Kakashi-sensei? I thought you retired. He continued reading his book and said. I'm not at liberty to say. Naruto and Sakura smiled at him. Naruto said. So you took your old job back. I bet they are pleased. Maybe. He said without emotion. Hanabi was confused and said. What job? Naruto looked over at her and knowingly said. Head of the Umbu Black Ops. Hanabi stared at him curiously in disbelief. Naruto started in on his 3rd bowl and said. Eat up, Hanabi. You will need the energy to keep training. She turned and looked at Naruto and then sourly looked at her ramen. She started eating and clearly didn't enjoy it. A short while later Kakashi looked over at Naruto and said. Thank you for treating me, Naruto. He held up a hand sign and disappeared into smoke. Naruto scowled for a moment at Kakashi's empty seat and tipped up his bowl to drink the ramen broth of his last bowl. He set the bowl down on the counter and wiped his mouth. Okay, are you two ready to get back to training? He said enthusiastically as he put his fist in the air. Sakura rolled her eyes and Hanabi giggled at him. Where you get all that energy I'll never know. Sakura said in a tired tone. Naruto led 2 very tired and sweaty ninjas through the front door of his house later that evening. Sakura's arms were hanging out in front of her as she slumped down in a nearby chair exhausted. Hanabi was exhausted as well and said. I can't wait to take a shower. Sakura wore a dreamy expression and said. A shower, I am my very own bathroom. She smiled at the thought of it. Naruto was just about to walk into the kitchen and cringed badly. Actually, Sakura-kun, I forgot to leave a clone to clean out your bathroom. Sorry, he said as he scratched the back of his head innocently. Sakura's head rolled on her shoulders to look at him. I hate you right now, Naruto, she said, slightly annoyed but very tired. Hanabi reached down and grabbed her hand. Come on, you can use the shower in my room. It is big enough for 5 people, she said, trying to get her up. Sakura gave her a flat look and said, You want to bathe together? She gave her a sarcastic look. Did you forget I'm a girl too? If you're that exhausted, then I'm worried about you taking your sage training. This is light training in comparison. My sage training isn't 9 hours a day, it's 14 hours a day, she said. Sakura let out a deep breath and said, I'm not so sure I want to become a sage anymore. Hanabi giggled at her and said, Come on. If you are too bashful, I'll let you shower first. They went up to Hanabi's room and Hanabi undressed and turned the knobs on the back of the mermaid shower. Water started pouring out of the jars each of the statues held. Hanabi turned to her and said, It takes it a minute for the water to get warm. What are you doing? Hanabi looked at Sakura as she was eyeing the closed door of her bedroom. I'm thinking of what kind of seal to put on the door in case Naruto tries to peek at us, she said while thinking. Hanabi looked at her flatly and slightly annoyed. Don't put any seal on my door. Naruto is not going to peek at us. Besides, I don't care if he sees me naked, she said. Sakura threw her a sarcastic look and said, You are far too trusting. Naruto is still a guy. He's a pervert. You should see the look on his face when he does see a woman's body. She continued, eyeing the door in thought. Hanabi walked over to her and gently pushed her hands down from the door. She wore a very pained expression. I have. He looks like he has lost his soul as he blushes and immediately leaves. I can't even describe the pain I saw in his eyes the day he saw me naked bathing in a spring during my sage training, she said with such a strong look of empathy in her eyes. Sakura started to remember many things Naruto has said. Flashback. I am thinking more like the old man these days. Everyone in the village is like my children. That's because I have given up on love, Sakura-kun. I asked her if I could have children. She ran some tests and the results were not good. Flashback end. Sakura looked at the floor, ashamed at herself. Of course he wouldn't peek at us. It's not like he doesn't want to. It's that he can't make love to a woman. So it would only hurt to see something he wanted and couldn't have, she thought sadly. Hanabi genuinely asked, Do you understand now? She took her gaze off of the floor and nodded solemnly. She looked her in the eyes and said, I'm sorry. I didn't look at things from Naruto's point of view. He accidentally walked in on me in the bath when we were 13 and I guess I never let it go. Steam was starting to fill the room. The shower is ready. Hanabi turned and got into it. She grabbed her shampoo and lathered up her hair. Sakura undressed, slightly sad and uncomfortably. All this time I have known him. Even when he told me he couldn't have children, I didn't realize his pain. I've known him for over 8 years and we have protected each other with our lives. How is it that I have been so blind to his pain, and how could she have seen it so easily? She thought sadly. Hanabi was scrubbing her hair as she turned around to see Sakura looking very sad while holding the clothes she took off in front of her. She was gazed off into nothingness. Are you okay, Sakura? I've only been to a public bath once. I can understand if you're shy, she said carefully. Sakura snapped out of her thought and shook her head. She stared in Hanabi's confused look and said, Sorry, I just had something on my mind. She dropped her sweat-covered clothes on the ground and stepped into the shower. Hanabi's eyes went wide while staring at her. Sakura suddenly became very self-conscious of her body and covered her private areas with her hands. What? She said nervously and childlike. Hanabi crouched down and stared at her hip. It's just like the books say, even female shinobi's bodies are covered in battle scars. Sakura blinked a few times in confusion. Battle scars? She asked her awkwardly. Yeah, Hanabi said as she pointed to a V-shaped scar on the left side of her hip. Where did you get this one? She asked curiously. Sakura was a bit caught off guard at her question and looked down at the scar and thought. Oh, I remember. I got that one falling off a cliff when I was 13. It was right before Naruto broke the second Hokage's sword. She said and thought. What about this one? She said, pointing to a thin line scar on the right side of her ribs. Oh, that one. I got grazed by a kunai during a fight with a rogue ninja. How did you get this one? She said as she examined a scar on her left shoulder, then went all the way through. She thought about it as Hanabi gently pushed her down to her knees and put her shampoo in her hair. Sakura leaned her head back and closed her eyes as Hanabi worked the lather into her hair. I got that one when I was stabbed with a sword on a mission 2 years ago. She said as Hanabi concentrated on shampooing her head. Hanabi dragged her fingernails all the way down to her scalp as she shampooed her hair. Sakura shivered in relaxation as Hanabi asked. How did you get the burn mark on your left arm? Sakura flinched and looked to the side. She tried to hide it but sadly said. Do you really want to know? Hanabi gently, but firmly pulled her head back in the stream of water flowing out of one of the mermaid's jars. She worked the soap out of her hair and said with a shrug. Not if it bothers you. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. Sakura held her breath as the water poured over her face and hair. Hanabi let her go a moment later. She shook the water off of her face and touched the burn scar on her arm. Actually, you should know about this one. Naruto gave me this one. She said seriously. Hanabi smiled at her. During training, I guess, knowing him. Sakura shifted her head back and forth seriously with Hanabi behind her. No, it wasn't during training, and it is something you should know about him as a team member. He is a Jinchuriki. He has control to a degree over the nine-tailed fox, but he has several states when he draws on its chakra. The most dangerous one is when he loses his temper and gets very mad. Red chakra will surround him, and the more angry he gets, the more chakra tails appear. He can control it up to 5 of those tails now. But before he could only control 3. After that the fox takes over. Even Orochimaru fled before his power and is 4-tailed from when the fox took over. I foolishly tried to calm him down, and he swiped me out of the way with one of his chakra tails and left me with this scar. If you ever see his 6th tail come out, then run away no matter what. He no longer knows friend from foe in that state. She said while holding her arm. Hanabi blinked at her in shock and timidly asked. Is there anything else I should know? She gave her a strained smile and said. Actually, yes, there is. You may think twice about wanting to sleep next to him after I tell you this. Naruto has been known to do the Rasengan in his sleep. Hanabi covered her mouth and laughed. I can just see him doing something like that, she said as she laughed. Sakura giggled as well after an awkward moment of thought. After a long moment, Hanabi shyly turned to Sakura while she washed out her own hair and said, Sakura, I have a question for you. You don't have to answer it if you don't want to. Sakura looked at her curiously and said, Yes, and what would that be? How far were you able to get Naruto to go? I mean, I only want to know my limit, she added quickly. Sakura blushed and looked away at the floor. I'm not sure I'm comfortable telling you that. Hanabi gave her an awkward grin and said, Sorry then, forget I asked. Sakura sighed, and after a long moment of silence she turned back to her. Third base, she admitted shyly. Hanabi stared at her in shock and then grinned evilly, clearly happy with her new prospects. Sakura looked at her sadly and said, But that was before he knew that he couldn't have children. The perverted grin faded from her face and was replaced by a slightly sad one. She sighed and nodded her head. I guess that means I need to stick to first base for now, she said, and then smiled meekly. That would probably be best, she said softly. Hey Sakura, thanks for telling me. Hanabi said honestly. It was a bit weird telling you that, but we are teammates now. Just don't push me for any details, okay? She said shyly. Hanabi looked over at her and said, okay. They finished showering and Hanabi got her a towel. She then went into her closet and put on fresh clothes. Crap, I forgot to get my clothes before coming to the shower, she said in dismay. You are almost a full head taller than me. I don't think any of mine will fit you, Hanabi said apologetically. It would be interesting to see what you looked like in a Toad Clan uniform though, she said with a smile. Flashback. It was a few days before Naruto found out he couldn't have children on a very cold day. Sakura had spent the night with him in his singles bed after having one of their most intimate encounters yet. She had been pushing him for a while to take the next step in their relationship. She was happy that they finally pleased each other's desires, but had been disappointed that she couldn't get him to go all the way. She awoke in Naruto's arms and smiled. She sat up in the bed and then turned to look at her clothes on the floor. The front of her shirt had been ripped open in their haste last night, even her bra had been pulled apart. Her expression became sour as she turned to Naruto, who had just propped his head up on his hand while lying in bed. "Morning, beautiful," he said sleepily. Sakura picked up her shirt and held it on the end of her finger in front of him. "How am I supposed to wear this home?" she said with a blushing smile. He shrugged casually at her and said, "You can wear one of my uniforms." She rubbed the sleep out of her eyes and said, "I can't wear that out in the village, everyone would know." Naruto chuckled softly and said, "No, I guess not, but you can wear it around the house until I can get you some other clothes." She bit her lips together shyly and said, "I'm okay." She walked over to his closet and took one of his uniforms off a hanger and put it on. She looked at herself in the mirror. Naruto's clothes swallowed her. She had to hold the pants by the front of them because they were too loose on her. The sleeves of his Toad Clan overcoat were so long only the tips of her fingers stuck out. She giggled at her appearance and turned to Naruto, who was watching her. "Well, how do I look?" she said while smiling as she turned in a circle. Naruto looked at her sweetly and said, "As wonderful as ever." Sakura gave him a thoughtful expression as she walked over to him and placed her hand on his bare chest. She leaned down and kissed him tenderly. End of flashback. "No, I don't think I want to wear a Toad Clan uniform again," she said shyly. Hanabi blinked at her in surprise as she tilted her head slightly and said, "Again?" Sakura held up her finger and looked at Hanabi sternly. "I told you. No details," she warned her. Hanabi backed away from her as she bit her lips together and shyly said, "Sorry, I didn't realize it was that kind of story." Sakura rolled her eyes and sighed. "I guess I'll just wear the towel to my room," she said as she opened the door and walked down the hall. She got to the kitchen by the stairs when Naruto came up. "Sakura can dinner." He stopped in mid-sentence when he got a look at her wearing nothing but a towel. He flinched and looked away as he closed his eyes. "Sorry, I felt you leave Hanabi's room and came to tell you dinner is almost ready," he said quietly. I saw it just for a split second, the pain Hanabi said she saw in his eyes. She was right. I need to do something to make this better, she thought. She looked at him sarcastically and said, "Naruto, open your eyes." "I'm covered, you don't need to make such a gesture." I'd prefer not to," he said and didn't move. "Sheesh, it's not like I've got something you haven't seen before. You're such a baby sometimes," she said in exasperation. Hanabi walked up behind Sakura and giggled at Naruto's shyness. "Come on, master, I'll go back downstairs with you," she said as Sakura went into her room to get dressed. They were all sitting at the table eating a short while later. Sakura was deep in conversation with Hanabi, telling her a story about one of their missions. Yup, he almost hit the guy with it and the jutsu ran out of chakra. You should have seen the look on his face. It was a bit scary back then, but it is funny looking back on it," Sakura said in high spirits. Hanabi had been hanging on every word and said, "Really? What happened next?" She smiled at him and said, "Kakashi-sensei had to come save him." Shizen said, "You two seem to be hitting it off quite well." Naruto nodded in agreement while looking at his food and said, "It's amazing really. To think a few days ago they were at each other's throats." Sakura looked over at him smartly and said, "You and Sasuke taught me something. You don't truly understand another ninja until you fight them." Hanabi smiled brightly. "Hey Sakura, why did you decide to become a medical ninja?" Hanabi asked curiously as she took a bite of rice. "Oh that," Sakura said while finishing her food. She pointed at Naruto with her chopsticks. "I was because of him. I found the best way for me to help him was to stay out of his way and heal him afterwards. Which is something you should take note of. If things get serious, just stay out of his way. They don't call him the most powerful ninjutsu in recent history for nothing," she said knowingly. Naruto rolled his eyes at her. She looked at him kindly and said, "I used it as an example, Naruto. I know you hate it when people say that about you." "Okay, I'll keep that in mind," Hanabi said honestly. Sakura asked Naruto, "Do you plan on teaching Hanabi medical ninjutsu?" He nodded his head as he leaned back in his chair. "Yes, I'm just not sure when it will be. I'm thinking of teaching her it after her sage training. It all depends on how large her chakra reserves are then. I have a number of jutsu I want to teach her. I have a limited amount of time though. I have to prioritize the order in which I teach her. If she can handle it, I want to teach her the yellow flash right after her sage training," he said casually. They were all shocked. Hanabi's chopped stick fell out of her hands and clattered loudly onto her plate. "Naruto! You can't really be thinking she would have enough chakra to perform that jutsu?" Sakura said in shock. Naruto sighed and said, "Sakura, please understand. I have to leave behind my jutsu. I will not live forever. If I don't teach it to someone, then it will be lost over time. That's why masters take students and teach them." Sakura was in thought for a long moment. "But I see your point, but I just wish there was another way," she said, clearly frustrated. "Sakura," he said kindly. "She is my disciple, I want to teach her all my jutsu." "So are you going to teach her the Rasengan too?" she asked worriedly. Naruto rubbed his chin in thought and finally said, "That one is not high on my priority list right now, but eventually if she wants to learn it." Hanabi suddenly smiled as big as she could. "You're going to teach me the pervert snuggle? I can't wait," she said excitedly. Sakura almost choked on her laugh. She turned and gave her a very reserved, curious look and asked Hanabi, "Pervert snuggle?" Naruto laughed nostalgically and said, "Yes, that's the name she gave it when I first met her." "That seems so long ago now," Hanabi said with a smile on her face. "Yes, it does. I was a totally different person back then. Before that, no one invaded my personal space. I met him, and within the span of a few days it was normal for him to be in my personal space," she said, then laughed. After things calmed down, Sakura asked, "Do you really think Hanabi will progress far enough to use the yellow flash?" Naruto shrugged his shoulders and said, "It all depends on how well her sage training goes. But I truly hope so." Sakura smiled at him and said, "Don't make her too powerful or she might come to rival you for the title of Hokage." Hanabi laughed and said, "No way, I'd never want that job. I've already all the responsibility I could ever want being an heiress to the Hyuga clan." Naruto laughed softly as he picked up his plate and took it into the kitchen. Sakura and Hanabi did likewise. Naruto started washing his plate and took Sakura's and Hanabi's. They started to turn around to leave when Naruto said, "Hanabi." She turned and walked back over to him as he finished washing the dishes and dried his hands with a nearby towel. He turned and placed his hands on her shoulders and leaned down to her face. He slowly and purposely said, I'm going out to train tonight. Okay? She covered her mouth to hide her giggle and said, Ah, here I was hoping I'd get lucky 3 nights in a row and wake up in your arms again. She and Sakura laughed. I almost wish you didn't tell me. By the way, she asked with a curious expression. Why do you go out at night to train? Where do you go? Naruto let go of her shoulders and stepped back. I go to the Hokage training grounds for my nightly training. She gave him a confused look. I didn't know there was a Hokage training grounds. Why do you go there? She asked intently. Because it's the only training ground with a chakra-absorbing barrier around it. The jutsu I practice there is far too dangerous to be used anywhere else. He told her. She thought about it for a moment as her eyes lit up. She smiled like a kid in a candy shop. So that's where you practice all your really cool jutsu. Ah, can I come? Please, just for tonight. He looked at her kindly and said, No. It's far too dangerous. I want to keep my disciple in one piece. She put on a fake pouting face and said, Aw, that's not fair. Naruto chuckled at her softly and said, I'll make it up to you when we get back to Mount Myaboku. She gave him a longing look and curiously asked, How? I'll show you the Raisin Shuriken. I'll even cut the top off a mountain with it for you. He told her sweetly. Her jaw dropped and then she smiled. She rushed him excitedly and hugged him fiercely. Thank you, master. Okay, let go. I need to get going. Why don't you get to know Sakura better while I'm gone? She let him go and said, I was going to do that anyway. Naruto walked to the door and said, I'm off you too. He opened the door and waved at them from behind. Hanabi said loudly, No fighting any dragons while you're gone. Sakura just looked at the very happy Hanabi and shook her head. I'd never seen a master and student relationship like theirs. But they make each other happy. I guess that's all that matters. She thought with a smile. Come on, Hanabi. I have something I want to show you in my room, she said. Hanabi looked over at her curiously and asked, What would that be? I guess you will have to come see if you want to know, Sakura said as she walked up the stairs, slight smile. Hanabi followed her to her room. Sakura's room had an old dresser with a mirror on top of it on one wall. In the corner near the far wall there was a pile of broken picture frames from when she moved in. Her bed was on the other wall and next to it was a desk with medical charts on it. Next to the desk was a bookshelf with scrolls and books on it. Sakura went over to her closet and started digging in the bottom of it. It's in here. Give me a second to find it, she said. Hanabi walked over to the desk and took a seat. Sakura pulled 2 photo albums out of the closet and said, I found them. She went over to the bed and sat down. She waved Hanabi over and then opened one of them. I figured you'd want to see these. They are pictures of Squad 7 and the Rookie 9. Hanabi pointed at one of the pictures and said, That's the same one Naruto has on his mantle. Yes, this was taken just after we became Squad 7. Hanabi laughed at one of the pictures and said, What happened to Naruto in this one? She asked while pointing at a photo of him clutching his stomach on the ground in pain. Sakura laughed and said, That was our first mission outside the village. On the way there he ate elderberries and got very sick. She turned the page. Next there was a picture of Squad 10 and then a picture of Naruto eating with Shikamaru and Choji at their favorite barbecue restaurant. Sakura showed her all her pictures she had gathered over the years and told her all about them. You have so many wonderful memories. I hope I'll have an album like yours one day, she said honestly. Sakura smiled honestly and said, Don't worry, one day you will. By the way, I have a book I want you to read. She got up and walked over to her bookshelf. She thumbed through her medical books and selected one of them. She went back to Hanabi and handed it to her. It's helpful to understand a jutsu before you learn it. There's a lot of good information on healing ninjutsu in that book. Naruto will eventually teach you it, but it's always helpful to get a head start," she said. Hanabi took the book and said, "Thank you. I'll start reading it soon. I'm going to head to bed now. Good night." "Night," Sakura said as Hanabi left. 2 days later. It was very early in the morning and the sun hadn't risen yet. Naruto went to knock on the door of Sasuke's house. "It's open, Naruto," he said calmly. Naruto entered and went to the table. Sasuke had already poured tea for them and was waiting for him. "I see you didn't forget," Naruto said as he took his seat. "Of course not. I heard Sakura moved in with you. How did Hanabi take this news?" Sasuke asked. At first she was a little standoffish, but soon they were getting along like family. "She talks to Sakura more than me now," he admitted. Sasuke nodded his head. "I see. It's hardly unexpected from everything you have told me about her. She was probably starved for female companionship. Don't tell me you are jealous?" he said. Naruto grinned slightly as he scratched the back of his head and said, "Maybe a little bit." He took a sip of his tea and said, "How is her training going?" "She is learning the summoning jutsu and she's making great progress now that Sakura is training with her," he said with a smile. Sasuke gave him a curious expression and asked, "Sakura is learning the summoning jutsu, you say? Did you finally convince her to take her sage training?" "Well, not exactly. I can't take all the credit. Hanabi was the one that convinced her." "And how did she succeed when you failed so many times?" he asked curiously. "Well, Sakura picked a fight with Hanabi and Hanabi beat her. A few hours after that she showed up at the training ground that we use with an assignment scroll from Tsunade. My first assignment as Squad 7's leader was to teach her the summoning jutsu," he replied. Sasuke nodded his head and thought. Hanabi, Konohamaru, and now even Sakura is trying to become a sage. That's quite the list of people you have inspired. How long until you leave to take her on the Toad Clan's spirit quest?" he asked. "That is the main reason I came here so early. We are leaving in a few hours. I'll be gone for 6 months, maybe longer depending on Hanabi's progress and the condition of the seal," he said as his hand instinctively went to his stomach. "I see. I'll be looking forward to your return then, my old friend, and to hear all about how you turned her into a true sage," he said honestly. "Goodbye, Sasuke. I'll tell you everything when I get back," Naruto said as he got up and left. After he had closed the door, Sasuke thought, if they succeed in becoming sages, then the Leaf will have 5. One village having so many sages has never been seen before in history. The closest it ever came was when all the Sannin were alive, if my memory serves me right. The 3 Sannin sages and the Hokage only made 4. Naruto, you are going to break another record in the history books. I just know it. Naruto came back through the gates of his compound just as the sun was dawning a new day. He went up to the door and opened it. Hanabi was already packed and putting her traveling sandals on when he came in. Shizen gave her a hug and said, "You behave yourself and don't give the elders a hard time when you get there." Hanabi smiled at her and said, "I won't. Please tell Sakura goodbye for me. She was called into work and I will not be able to tell her." "Of course I will, dear," she said kindly. Hanabi lifted her traveling pack and said, "I'm ready to go, master." He smiled at her and said, "Okay, let's go." They walked across the village and they were nearing the main gate. "Dad, look, it's Sage Naruto and that girl that beat Konohamaru. Is he really a hero of the 5 nations?" a young boy said while pointing at them. The boy's father kneeled down and said, "Yes, he is, and he will likely be our next Hokage." "Wow, really?" the boy asked as his father nodded his head. "Yes, my son," he said with a nod. Naruto suddenly stopped and said, "Hanabi, I want you to let go of any sage chakra you have. She looked at him curiously for a moment and then closed her eyes in concentration. She released the small amount of sage chakra and opened her eyes. Naruto continued walking. She walked up next to him and asked, "Master, why did you want me to do that?" Naruto grinned slightly and said, "You'll see shortly." They made it within sight of the main gate and Hanabi could see a ton of people there to see them off. The rest of the rookie 9-Ino, Team Ebisu and Guy Sensei's team were there. Kakashi, her father and even the Hokage was there as well as many others. Hanabi shrank back behind Naruto. "Why are they all here?" she asked shyly. He grabbed her by her shoulder strap and pulled her up alongside of him. "They are here to see us off. We will be gone a long time. It's like a farewell party," he said as the crowd started waiting and cheering at them. Naruto led Hanabi into the crowd of people. "Hey, why did you guys do all this?" he asked loudly. "Well, you aren't going to be back for a while. We thought we would see you off," Guy Sensei said with his signature 2 thumbs up and gleaming smile. Kakashi came up to them with a camera. He held it out to Naruto and then thought for a moment. "On second thought, you'd probably break it." Everyone laughed as Naruto put on a sour look. He turned to Hanabi and handed her the camera. "Get me some good pictures of your training and I'll make you an album like the one I gave Sakura," he said with a smile as he placed the camera in her hands. "Good luck, Naruto," Shikamaru said while Choji nodded in agreement. Neji and Lord Hyuga walked up to them next. "Good luck becoming a sage, Hanabi and Naruto, don't overdo it," Neji said with a smile. Lord Hyuga sternly said, "Don't raise your chakra levels too quickly and lose our gentle fist art. My daughter, know that I am proud of you." He turned to Naruto and said, "I have little doubt you will give the Hyuga clan its first sage. You have already turned her into a fine shinobi. May the will of fire burn brightly in both of you on your travels." He bowed and went to step away when Hanabi wrapped her arms around him in a hug. "Goodbye, father," she said as she let him go. Naruto told Hayashi, "Don't worry, I'll turn her into a sage, she is my disciple after all." Hinata told them, "Good luck you two and we will miss you." "Yeah, good luck you too," Kiba said with a smile. Shino walked up to them and said, "I've never been very good at this sort of thing, but here." He handed Hanabi a small jar. Naruto looked at it curiously. "What is it?" "Bug repellent, it's the only thing I could think to get you too," he said and walked back over to Kiba and Hinata. Naruto laughed. Hanabi honestly said, "Kami, you have no idea how good of a gift you got us. That toad village is crawling with bugs." Everyone laughed at her comment. Tintin walked up to Naruto, but unlike everyone else she wasn't smiling. Her look was serious. "Are you taking IT with you?" she asked intently. Naruto smiled at her and with both hands he reached under his overcoat and pulled out 2 swords. He held them by their sheaths out in front of him in a cross pose. "Yes, I'm taking both the Thunder Gods with me. Rest assured they are safe," he said reassuringly. She breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Good, I'm glad they are safe and good luck with your training." Tsunade walked up to the 2 of them and stared deep into Naruto's eyes. She sighed and said, "It seems like only yesterday you were a pint-sized Chunnin learning the Rasengan. Now you're a sage leaving with your disciple to make her a sage as well." Naruto looked at her very honestly and kindly as he said, "Mother, we have no need for such words. We have always been able to understand each other by the looks in our eyes." He walked over and wrapped his arms around her. She hugged him back and forced herself not to cry. "You really know how to make me feel old." She let him go. "You better bring her back in one piece or I'll take you off my list of successors for Hokage." He sweat dropped. "Come on. Don't be like that," he said loudly. She turned her nose up at him and looked away. "I'll have to because if you don't come back with her I'll kill you." He laughed and said, okay, I get it." Tsunade walked over to Hanabi and placed her hand on Hanabi's head. You were supposed to make Naruto more like a noble. That is why I put you in Squad 7. She said and then sighed at her. But it looks like he has made you more like him. You've turned into a bit of a hothead. At least you can keep him in check better than anyone else. She smiled at her. Good luck you too. And you as well, Konohamaru. She said as she stepped back and looked at him by the gate. A certain pink-hair medic was running up the street at them. Naruto smiled and said, Sakura-kun. He waved at her. She was running at them with open arms and Naruto opened his arms to receive his hug goodbye from her. She ran right by him and hugged Hanabi. Naruto pouted with 2 rivers of tears flowing down his face. What am I? Chopped liver? He said as everyone laughed at him. I got Ino to cover for me so I could see you 2 off. She said as she let go of Hanabi and smiled at her. You still never beat me in summoning Sakura-kun. She said with smile. Hey! We're neck and neck now. She said with her fist up pretending to be angry. Her look suddenly softened and she said honestly. I'm really going to miss you, Hanabi. You already have your master's greatest power. She looked at her curiously and said. What power is that? You grow on people very quickly and form tight bonds with them. She said honestly as she turned to Naruto. I really want to tell you good luck, but after all the years I've known you I know you will not need it. She said and he smiled at her. So I'll say hurry home soon you too. Goodbye Sakura-kun. Naruto said. Goodbye Sakura-kun and remember you have to have faith in yourself to become a sage. She said honestly. Tsunade walked up to Sakura and said. They aren't the only leading for sage training, Sakura. She stared blankly at her and said. No wait, I haven't even packed and I haven't mastered the jutsu. The Hokage grinned at her as she bit her thumb and went through a series of hand signs. But I have. Unsummoning jutsu! She yelled as she grabbed onto Sakura's arm and slammed her hand into the ground. They both disappeared. Naruto just shook his head and said. She just had to steal our thunder. He walked over to Raichi, Moegi, Udon and Konohamaru near the left side of the gate. Okay Konohamaru, as your master I have to check your pack before you leave. He said very seriously as Konohamaru returned the look. They both said. Down their packs as Naruto said. I'm only look for 2 things. They both reached into their pack at the same time. They both said as the same time. Extra water and instant ramen. They yelled as they held up their ramen and extra water. Everyone's sweat dropped as both of them laughed. Suddenly everyone else joined in too. Hanabi walked up to Konohamaru sneered at him childlike. When we meet again you'll be calling me a toad sage. He returned her look and shook his fist at her as he said. Right back at you. I'll be a monkey sage when we meet again. Maybe in 150 years at the rate you're going. Raichi said sarcastically. Konohamaru hung his head and sighed as everyone laughed. After the noise died down Hanabi looked at him softly and said. You'll make a fine monkey sage, I just know it. He nodded his head at her. Yeah, I know. I'm gonna miss you guys though. He said clearly trying not to cry. Naruto grabbed him by the shoulders and looked at him proudly. You're well on your way to becoming a fine 7th Hokage. I know I will be a very proud master when I return here and your grandfather's spirit will be proud as well. Keep it up and goodbye for now. He said as Konohamaru wiped the tears out of his eyes. Okay Konohamaru, finish your goodbyes so we can be off. Raichi said in a tired tone. Konohamaru turned to his sensei and teammates. Moegi, keep Udon in line and don't let him get into trouble. He said as he turned to Udon. Udon, keep training under your new master Red Tooth or whatever his name is. Red Claw not Red Tooth and I will lead her. He said sadly. Kakashi's eyes went wide. Udon being trained by the infamous Red Claw. He is the one that stepped down from head of the Umbu Black Ops when I took over all those years ago. He has to be at least 80 by now and he never took on any student and no one was ever good enough to him. He thought soullessly. Konohamaru turned to his sensei and said, I will not forget what you have taught me, Sensei Ebisu, and I'll eat my green vegetables. I can't believe you are already going off to become a sage. I'm very proud of you. Goodbye for now, he said honestly. Konohamaru turned back to Raichi and said, Okay, I'm ready, Elder Raichi. The monkey walked up to his side and went through a series of hand signs. Unsummoning Jutsu, he said as he touched Konohamaru's leg and slammed his hand into the ground. They disappeared into a puff of smoke. Naruto looked back over at Hanabi and said, It's time we were off as well. He shouldered his pack and waved goodbye to everyone. They cheered at the two of them. Hurry back, Kiba yelled. Goodbye, Naruto-san, Lee shouted. Naruto reached the gate and turned back around. Hey Kakashi-sensei. Good luck filling in as Hokage until Tsunade gets back, he yelled back at him. Kakashi's eyes went blank. Wait, Tsunade left. So is Naruto. I'm the only other on the list. No way. I have to run the Umbu and filling in as Hokage. This is just too cruel, he thought as he slumped forward in defeat with 2 rivers of tears flowing out of his eyes. Naruto and Hanabi set out on the road. When they were a few hundred yards away from the village, they heard the sounds of thousands of people cheering them. They turned around and saw nearly the entire village up on the walls surround the village cheering loudly for them to send them off. Hanabi was a bit overwhelmed at the sight before her as Naruto said, I thought I'd have to become Hokage before the Leaf Village did something like this. This reminds me of the time when I brought Gaara back to his village. He smiled down and Hanabi then waved back at the village. He turned around and charged off into the morning sun with Hanabi in tow. Come on! It's off to Mount Myaboku to complete your training. 8 months later. It was a cold morning on the 22nd of December. The fringed winds howled outside the Hokage's office as her and Kakashi looked out at the Hokage monument on an overcast day. What are you thinking about, Tsunade? Are you worried about Shikamaru and Kurenai's newborn? Kakashi asked quietly. She shook her head. No, he was born healthy. I was thinking about how quiet it has been since Naruto, Hanabi, and Konohamaru left for sage training. They have been gone too long. Sakura completed her training 3 months ago. I'm worried about Naruto and the seal. Kakashi looked her up and down and said, to say nothing of wanting them home for the holidays. I already saw the wrapped boxes you got them. He looked over at the wrapped boxes behind her desk and then turned back to her. You shouldn't worry so much. It's only been 2 weeks since his last messenger toad, he said calmly. I want to examine the seal when he gets back. We are well into the time when it could break, she said solemnly. The early time it could break. I'm sure Naruto wouldn't have stayed away for so long if it was close to breaking, he said as a knock on the door sounded. Lady Tsunade, Sage Sakura is here to see you, the Umbu guard said through the door. Tsunade turned to the door and said, Send her in. The door opened and a howling gust of cold air rushed in. The air threw Tsunade's blonde hair up as she stepped into her office. Sakura hadn't taken to wearing a fancy sage uniform like Naruto's. She wore her normal uniform and her only appearance change was the green diamond sage mark on her forehead. Her main change was in her eyes. She no longer doubted herself the way she used to. She was much calmer and more at peace than before. She walked in and closed the door. In her hand was a small frozen toad that had its tongue sticking out. I found this outside your door, Lady Tsunade, Sakura said while holding it up. Tsunade's eyes went wide for a quick moment before she looked over at Kakashi and gave him a nod. He went over and picked up the frozen toad in his hand radiated heat. The toad melted and stood up, throwing water off its back. It croaked quietly for a long moment. Tsunade got right down in the small toad's face and said, Well, I'm waiting. The toad croaked loudly and opened its mouth. The end of a green scroll was hanging out of its mouth. Tsunade grabbed it by the tips of her fingers and pulled it out of its throat. She shook the toad spit off of it and opened it quickly. She read it within the span of a heartbeat and eyes went blank. Kakashi curiously said, "What is it?" Sakura was holding her breath for the news as well. Tsunade handed him the open green scroll, unable to speak. He held it up in front of him and read it aloud. "Mother, we are coming home." Sakura smiled and said, "Finally, after all this time I'll get to see Naruto and Hanabi again." Kakashi told her seriously, "You know what this means, don't you?" "Yes, it means if Konohamaru makes it back, then the Leaf really will have more sages than ever in recorded history," she replied, clearly still lost in thought. Kakashi sighed. "So much for those quiet days, but they were nice while they lasted," he said sourly. Sakura only smiled bigger. Snow littered the ground in the cold and frigid December morning. The two main gate guards were shivering in the cold at their station. "I can't wait until our shift is over. I'm so cold. I think they have shriveled up and fallen off." "How can you stand this cold, Izumo?" Kotetsu said miserably. "Hey, I'm freezing out here too, but my little girl said all she wanted for the holidays is for it to snow. So I'll happily bear it for her," Izumo said as three people wearing hooded white leaf traveling cloaks came through the main gate. They walked over to the guards. Izumo said, "Name, rank, squad and mission assignment?" "Name Shikamaru, rank Jonin Commander, Squad 10, mission to find some place warm and get out of the freezing cold," he said from under his hood. "Cut the protocol, Izumo. Just wave us through. I need to get to the hospital to see my newborn son. I can believe the Hokage sent me on an ambassador mission to the Lord of Fire at this time of year. This is Naruto's job, he's the one that wants to be Hokage," Shikamaru said bitterly. "Achoo!" The largest hooded figure sneezed. "Come on, we have been walking for 3 days in this weather. I'm Choji, rank Chunnin, mission to get some hot barbecue in my belly as soon as possible," the smallest hooded member said. "Name Ino, rank." She suddenly hit the ground shivering as gust of wind blew her hood back. Her lips were white and her skin was very pale. "Ino!" Choji said as he rushed and wrapped his arms around her to keep her warm. "Ino?" Choji said questioningly. "You aren't shivering, you're trembling. What's wrong?" he asked with his voice full of worry and concern. She trembled for a long moment before saying, "There is a huge amount of chakra heading for us. Two never felt this much chakra before. It's terrifyingly powerfully whatever it is," she said while still trembling. Izumo stared at her blankly. "How could we have missed it? She's right at is huge. Massive even. Well, at is a toasty 2 degrees out here," Kotetsu said in a foul mood while he shivered with his hands between his legs. Shikamaru looked over at Ino in dismay. "Damn it! My first child was just born yesterday and I was away and couldn't be there for Kurenai during labor. Now this happens. I know the only things that could have enough chakra to make Ino tremble like that. One of the tailed beasts as reformed just like Tsunade always feared," he thought bitterly as he put on his Umbu Fox mask. He quick took control of the situation. "Choji, take Ino to the hospital. Kotetsu, get to Umbu headquarters and get them to send every available ninja down here to reinforce the gate that they have, now. You!" He pointed to a merchant that was sitting on a bench resting his tired shoulders from dragging his cart across town all morning. "Get to the Hokage's office and summon her immediately," he said in a voice so commanding that the merchant jumped with a start and dashed off without even taking his cart. He drew a kunai with a Umbu paper bomb hanging off of it and held it out in front of himself. "That chakra is getting stronger and stronger. It has to be getting closer and closer. What tailed beast could it be?" he thought while clenching his teeth. "Izumo, you and me are the hold out until the rest of the Umbu get here," he said in a commanding voice. "Yes, Commander," he said as he pulled out one of his kunais and posed himself for attack while looking at the gate. The minutes ticked by .1.3.5.10, all the while Umbu filled up the area behind them. After over 15 minutes 40 Umbu were at the gate ready to strike on Shikamaru's command. The wind howled as two hooded figures in black traveling cloaks walked through the gate. Shikamaru swallowed hard. Whoever they are, the taller one has at least 10 times more chakra than the Hokage. Kurenai, I don't think I'll be coming home. I hope you keep the name I wanted for our child, but I'm guessing you won't as stubborn as you or you'll use the name you wanted. He thought while watching the two figures cloaked in black. All the Umbu were waiting for the signal from him to attack. He watched them carefully stop at the gate for a long, intense moment. The Umbu stared down the two figures cloaked in black, and the wind picked up and blew the hems of their traveling cloaks. They started to move again, but not at the Umbu. They walked over to the gate guard's post. The taller of the two cloaked figures grabbed the frozen inkwell on the desk and summoned a small flame without hand signs. It enveloped the inkwell for a few moments and then went out when the ink was a liquid again. Great a fire master. At least I'll be warm in my death in this bitter cold. Shikamaru thought sarcastically. The taller cloaked figure pulled out a writing brush and turned the gate guard's clipboard around. The taller figure slowly wrote something down on it and then turned back to the main street. Then walked back over to the center of the gate with the smaller cloaked figure following behind. They suddenly both drew weapons. The taller of the two of them drew a cobalt blue kunai and the shorter one drew out a curved short sword with blue runes on it. Shikamaru thought. It couldn't be. They both disappeared without a trace. Commander! Umbu rushed up to him with the gate registry. He held him away with his hand while looking down the street. Don't bother, I know who it was now. To think he's became so much more powerful. He turned back the horde of Umbu and yelled to the rest of them. We are off to the center of the village. No one is to attack under any circumstances without direct orders. The two cloaked figures reappeared outside of Ichiraku Ramen in the middle of town. A figure cloaked in a strange cloak made from bright green tree leaves stood up from the bar. The cold wind picked up as the cloaked figure stood up off the place at the shop and turned around. The three cloaked figures stood still as the wind howled and Umbu popped up on every eave of every building around the main street intersection. Here I thought I'd be able to at least finish lunch before you two showed up. The green-cloaked person said while turning around. The wind screamed for a moment as the tall figure in the black cloak took a step away from shorter person in black. The leaves on the person with the cloak of green shook violently as he was encased in blue chakra that surrounded him. The green-cloaked person burned with chakra so dense it was visible as the ground around him trembled. The shorter ninja in black drew a short sword that was covered in blue runes in a reverse pose while trying to shield their face from the green-cloaked person's tremendous chakra. The shorter person held the sword up to their face with the blade pointing down at an angle. I will show you that you are no match for me now, the green-cloaked person said as his chakra grew even stronger and larger. The smaller person with the short sword didn't move as the force of the green-cloaked person's chakra grew. Let's do this, the green-cloaked person said as the ninja threw down its left hand and a bow staff with golden tips on it appeared in his hand. The green-cloaked person pointed the staff at the smaller person in black and said, I will show you your last victory was. The smaller figure in black appeared right in front of the green-cloaked person with a sword at the green-cloaked person's throat. The sword cut the first 3 inches of his green hooded leaf cloak. The cold wind picked up again and it howled, flapping their cloaks in its frigid breeze. Then it spun in a small cyclone around the two of them. It slowly tore the hood of the green-cloaked person's away with a loud rip. The hood flew high into the air and disappeared in a gust of leaves. The person in black drew back their blade and then slashed at the green-cloaked man like the ninja was trying to take his head off, but the swipe was too wide and completely missed his neck. The swipe rounded his neck from behind and the person in black pulled the person in green into a fierce hug. I missed you terribly, Konohamaru, Hanabi said as her hood fell to her shoulders. He hugged her back so strongly that he lifted her off the ground. Kami knows I missed you too, Hanabi. They both had tears in their eyes as they embraced each other for a long moment. The tall black-cloaked person walked over to them and they let each other go. He placed his hand on Konohamaru's shoulder and said, Well done, Monkey Sage. Well done. Tsunade and Sakura landed on a nearby building near Shikamaru in his fox mask. "What's the status on the intruders?" she asked. "One of them is Hanabi and another of them is Konohamaru. I'm pretty sure you can guess who the last one with chakra that dwarfs even your own is," he yelled through the gusting wind while shielding his face. "Naruto," Sakura said blankly. "Tell the Umbu to stand down," she said as she leaped off the building with Sakura. They landed on the other side of the street from them. The tall cloaked person turned his head as they landed. "Naruto?" Tsunade said questioningly with a hopeful look in her eyes as Hanabi sheathed her sword in the sheath that was hung horizontally on her belt from behind. Hanabi stepped back to the tall cloaked person's side. The tall cloaked person slowly grabbed the sides of their hood as another gust of wind blew loudly. The tall black hooded person slowly pulled back their hood and it dropped to their shoulders. The man had spiky blonde hair, familiar blue eyes and 3 black whisker marks on each cheek. Sakura rushed him and yelled, "Naruto!" She crashed into him and hugged him fiercely. "What took you so long?" "I've been back for 3 months," she said emotionally. Shikamaru dismissed the Umbu and thought, "You always have to make an entrance, don't you, Naruto? I can't believe my eyes, there is 5 sages down there. Who would have thought the leaf would one day have 5 sages all at once?" He shook his head and then left for the hospital to see his newborn son. "I had to finish training Hanabi. It took longer than I thought," he said with a smile as he let her go. "Didn't you get my messenger toad? What was with all the Umbu?" he asked while looking around. She laughed with tears in her eyes. "Yes, we just found the poor guy half froze to death outside the Hokage's office not 10 minutes ago," she said. Hanabi walked up to her in her white sage outfit that was almost exactly like Naruto's, but had the symbol of the Hyuga clan on it. She had only grown more beautiful since the last time they had seen her. Hanabi walked over to Sakura and hugged her. "I missed you as well, Sakura, or should I say Sage Sakura?" "I missed you too, Sage Hanabi," she said as she held her tight. Tsunade walked over to Naruto. "Hello, mother. I don't think you will be able to remove my name from your list of the possible ninja for 6th Hokage." "I've done it, Hanabi is a sage now," he said with a slight smile and proudness in his eyes. "I want to hit you, but," Tsunade said and then walked over to him. He wrapped him in a bone-popping hug and said, "The best gift you could have given me for the holidays is just having you home. The great sage is home. Inform everyone that Naruto has returned." And Umbu yelled loudly and everyone cheered them. A short while later they were all seated at Ichiraku waiting for their food. Sakura asked Naruto, "How much did she master?" He giggled slightly and said, "Well, quite a bit actually. Let's just say I doubt her father is the strongest Hyuga anymore." "How did your training go?" she shyly said. "Not bad, I guess. My healing is a lot stronger and my taijutsu form is cleaner. You know that's not really very fair that you taught Hanabi the Yellow Flash Master," Konohamaru said while giving a playful flat look. "Hey!" Hanabi said in playful offense. "I worked my butt off training to master that one." They both laughed. Sakura asked Konohamaru, "Did you learn any cool new jutsu?" Konohamaru replied, "Yeah, but it's the other stuff that helped me the most. It took me a long time to master moving and fighting without wasting any energy. Also check this one out." He held out his left hand and moved it behind his back and then placed his hand on his right ear. He turned his hand in a complete circle and placed it on his ear again. Sakura, Hanabi, and Naruto gave him an amazed look. "I'm very flexible now. That one was very painful to learn, but now it's very hard for someone to grapple me. Raichi doesn't have a problem beating me though. I've also learned to use tree leaves as weapons and I can climb a tree like a monkey without using chakra," he said. Hanabi gave him a curious look and said, "Did you have to go through the stilling your mind and becoming one with everything exercise?" He gave her a so-so look and said, "Not exactly. I did have to learn to mediate and think of nothing. I guess it's pretty close, but not quite the same. Hanabi eyed him carefully and said, "So you don't have sage mode in the monkey clan?" You know I asked that same question to King Imma too. It's another yes and no answer. You need to understand the physical differences between a toad and a monkey. A toad uses a quick burst of speed and then they rest. Like when they move, for example. They can jump very long distances, but after each jump they tend to rest. Sure, they can keep jumping bunch of times in a row, but they will tire out soon. Sage mode is a toad clan thing. It fits with their burst of power and then resting that their bodies are built for. Take how a toad eats. They sit very still and wait for an insect to come within striking range. Then they snap it out of the air with a quick burst of power. It's just like how Naruto told me about how sage mode works. You become one with everything by sitting perfectly still. Then you enter sage mode and start burning up a lot of chakra. This is why he has to get the job done quickly or he will go into chakra exhaustion when using sage mode. The monkey, on the other hand, is agile and always moving. They too become one with their terrain. They can remember every tree they have ever climbed since they were born. The monkeys are much more social animals and live in packs their whole lives. I pretty much see them as my family now, but it was hard at first. They believe in teamwork much more than the Toad clan. They have a much more wait and see from a distance's attitude. Unlike the toad that is always saving up energy for an attack. A rested toad is always ready to attack, but the monkey has a different outlook on combat. Take wild monkeys when you enter their home of trees. They don't attack first, they hoot and yell at you trying to scare you off. If you don't leave, they start throwing things at you. If you still don't leave, they start trying to actually hit you with the things they throw. If you try to climb the tree to go after them, they will pelt you with things until the last moment, then use their speed and agility to jump to another tree. Then it starts all over with them throwing things at you. He said in exasperation, clearing, having first-hand experience of this. Monkeys have a great amount of stamina and will do this to you all day. You will get eventually flustered and start using more energy than you should to try to match their speed and catch them. Then you only tire yourself faster to an opponent that already had more stamina than you. If you do corner one of them, they are fierce fighters and quite strong for their size. They strike fast and hard. They use their speed and agility to make them hard to hit as well. King Inma told me if a toad sage and a monkey sage fight, the toad has the advantage at first, but the longer the fight lasts, the more the advantage shifts to the monkey. Naruto over there is an exception to the rule of basics as far as a toad sage goes. He has both the speed and power of a toad, but also had the stamina of a member of the Bull clan. This is why he was given a title beyond that of a normal sage. Even the monkey clan hail him as of the great sage Naruto, and they have a lot of respect for him, as do the other clans. He is just like his elder sage master. Another exception to the rule of basics, he said, slightly frustrated. Hanabi looked over at Naruto in surprise, then looked back over to Konohamaru and said, "When did you get so smart, and how is Fukasaku an exception to the rule of basics?" Naruto nodded his head and asked, "Her. Don't you see something different about him and Shima that sets them apart from the rest of that Toad clan?" Hanabi looked down at the counter and thought intently for a long moment before looked back at him and asking, "What does make them so special? I know they are very powerful and all, but how does that make them different?" Naruto laughed softly as Konohamaru, clearly annoyed, said, "They are always in sage mode. They found a way around their low stamina, making them an exception to the rule of basics." Hanabi looked at him in confusion and asked, "Why would that bother you?" Tsunade tossed her knowing look and said, "Isn't obvious from everything he has said?" He asked the Monkey Clan how to beat Naruto. She looked back over at him in surprise and curiously said, "What did they tell you?" He sighed and then picked up his head while sourly looking at the back of the ramen shop. Flashback. Konohamaru was deep in the sacred forest with King Inma and Elder Raichi eating a lunch of bananas. King Inma was peeling whole bushels of them at once and eating them. Raichi took his time peeling them one at a time and eating slowly. Konohamaru was halfway through his first one when he honestly asked, "Hey, how can I beat Naruto in a fight?" King Inma looked over at him curiously as Raichi sighed and said, "I've told you so many times already, find your strengths over your opponent and use them against him by making him fight your fight." King Inma laughed loudly and said, "I guess you still have some of the Toad Clan's lessons that still need to be broken out of you. Remember the basics of combat that we have taught you. Make them use their weakness against your strength. We have taught you to use your head. Let's look at the opponent you wish to defeat and find his strengths and weaknesses. You have chosen a very difficult foe in your master. Naruto is a great sage and they come along once every 300 years or so for a reason. Our tactics of making another fight our fight does not apply when fighting him. He will outlast us, not the other way around. So we cannot use stamina against him. He has vast power that can overwhelm our agility with a widespread attack, so we can't use our agility in our favor either. Then let's look at it from an elemental standpoint. Your elements are the same as your grandfather's, earth and fire. He is stronger than you in both of these elements as well as a master of wind and water. So you can't use these to beat him either. Now let's look at jutsu, chakra and chakra control. He dwarfs you in jutsu and chakra, there is no question about that. You two are about even in chakra control, but seeing as how he has so much more of it than you, I'd even have to give him the advantage of chakra control as well. I've already taught you the basic differences between the toad and the monkey. Toads are natural ambush attackers, so even in the element of surprise you would be out matched. You would be fighting their fight, which would put you at a disadvantage. He furthermore can use the one type of jutsu that can surpass and trump even the rule of basics and the rule of elemental weaknesses, time/space ninjutsu. This goes back to the very basics of combat, speed and power, and with his stamina to back it up you are dwarfed yet again. Your only logical option is to hide or run away. Hiding against a toad sage, this is useless. Their sensory perception reigns supreme among all the clans. So your only option is to run against someone that can use time/space ninjutsu. This hopeless. There is only one X factor to every fight, and unfortunately it's the base of all Naruto's lesson, like his master. He said kindly. "What is that?" Konohamaru asked curiously. "The only thing that can overcome any form jutsu or attack. Your master calls it guts, but we have the Monkey Clan have another name for it, heart. I'm sorry to be the one that has to tell you this, but he is a grandmaster above all grandmasters when it comes to this. It is his greatest power," he said as he rested his hand on Konohamaru's shoulder. Konohamaru let out a sigh and asked, "So there really isn't a way to beat him for me, is there?" King Inma leaned back on his hands while sitting on the grass with crossed legs while wiggling his toes and said, "Combat is but a footnote in life, young monkey. Being a monkey isn't about combat, it's about living. To feel the breezes on your face as to flip thought the trees, to know each leaf and branch like they are family. To live as wild and free as the day you were born, that is the way of the Monkey Clan. I know your master is of the Toad Clan and I've had to break you of several of their bad habits. But I can tell you one thing you have over your master." Konohamaru looked at him curiously and asked, "What is that?" "You know how to live and not let life pass you by," King Inma said. And a flashback. Hanabi blinked at him in mild surprise and said, "I didn't know King Inma was so wise." Konohamaru nodded his head slowly in agreement. "I didn't know that either until he taught me." Sakura smiled at him and said, "You really have changed." He shrugged and said, "I had to become a monkey sage." "Did anything happen while we were gone?" Sakura looked over at him and said, "Yes, quite a few things have happened. For starters, Shikamaru and Kurenai got married. Their first child was born last night. Shikamaru took over for his father as Jonin commander. Rock Lee advanced in rank to Jonin and really wants to make Jonin instructor by summer. He wants to train students after seeing how strong you and Hanabi became after being trained by Naruto. Ino became the head surgeon at the hospital. Niji is still training his group and has been having good progress now that they have given up their crushes on Naruto. Shino just made Jonin instructor and has yet to get any students as of right now. Kiba joined the Umbu full-time and I don't know what he does, obviously. Hinata just took her Jonin test and hasn't gotten the results yet. She has become much more confident since you left. Tintin has been swamped with orders after making the rank of Grandmaster Weaponsmith for remaking the second Hokage's sword. She doesn't go out on many missions anymore because of this. She is still a Chunnin. Choji is thinking about trying to make Jonin because he wants to teach as well. He has been helping at the academy as a substitute teacher. It has been pretty quiet since I got back, but I did help decorate the hospital for the winter festival, she said. Naruto sighed and said, "So much has happened since we left. We missed Shikamaru's wedding. That's too bad. I wanted to see him all uncomfortable in a suit too." Sakura and Tsunade laughed. "I've got some pictures in my office I can show you later, Naruto," Tsunade said. "Speaking of Tintin, I need to go see her today," he said seriously. Hanabi said, "I want to go visit my clan first. I'm sure father is worried about my gentle fist art." Tsunade gave out a sarcastic short laugh and said, "You are right about that. He still berates me from time to time for putting you on Squad 7 and letting Naruto teach you. You were supposed to make Naruto more like a noble and instead he made you his disciple." Hanabi smiled at her and said, "Don't worry, Lady Hokage. After our first sparring match he will never bother you about that again." She gave her a knowing look as Ichiraku served them their orders. "It's on the house today, but I would like one thing while you all are here," he said with a big smile. Naruto smiled big at his food and said, "Whatever you want. I've been dreaming of this for 8 months." He broke apart his chopsticks and started inhaling his food. Ichiraku pulled out a camera and took a picture of them. It was a good shot save for Naruto's awkward look as he glanced up from his ramen. The day that Leaf Village had 5 living sages at one time and they all came here to eat. "I'm going to hang this picture on the back wall when I get it developed," he said happily. Naruto and Hanabi were walking slowly up the winding path to the Hyuga compound main gate. They stopped as the gate guard as he said, "I have heard of your return, Sage Naruto and Sage?" Hanabi nodded her head. The guard smiled at her proudly and said, "And Sage Hanabi, Lord Hyuga and Niji are currently sparring in the indoor dojo. It looks like it might snow soon, so you had best hurry." He opened the gate and waved them through with a bow. They walked in the cold to the square-shaped building that was built around an open courtyard. They went through an open archway that led to the courtyard and over to a set of open double doors. The sounds of sparring and the movement of feet on polished wood emitted from the doorway. Hayashi and Niji were sparring while Hinata was sitting on a bench in the room watching them. Niji glanced at who had entered and Hayashi went through a series of attacks that sent Niji to the ground. "You are getting much better, Niji. I have little doubt that you will one day be at my level," Hayashi said. Niji sat up from the floor covered in sweat and stared at Hanabi blankly. Hayashi gave Niji a confused look as he suddenly became aware of the massive amount of chakra behind him. He turned himself around quickly in full defensive form. Hanabi grinned slightly at him and said, "Hello, father. I have returned." Hayashi relaxed his fighting form as Naruto tried to suppress his urge to giggle. "I had heard you two came home earlier. How have you been, my daughter?" he said as he breathed hard from his sparring match. She smiled warmly at him and said, "The training was difficult, but I am now a full-fledged Toad Sage father." Naruto put his hand on her shoulder and looked at her proudly as he said, "The elders gave her the rank of sage some time ago. She has learned a lot since the last time you saw her." Hinata stared at her blankly as Niji just shook his head in exasperation. "I just knew you would do it, Naruto," Niji said while shaking his head at the floor. Hayashi eyed her curiously and slight worriedly before asking, "What of your gentle fist art? I hope you took steps to preserve it." Hanabi looked over at Naruto and smiled. Hanabi took off her white overcoat with black flames on the bottom hem and the names of all her masters written on the back. She handed it to Naruto and he folded it over his arm. She unhooked the Flying Thunder God Sword from the back of her belt and handed it to him. He took it and held it in his free hand as she turned to face her father. She slowly got into her defensive taijutsu form as Neji picked himself off of the floor. Neji took a seat by Hinata and Naruto took a seat on the other side of her. "I will show you that I am still the heiress of the Hyuga clan, father," she stated with conviction and without any doubt in her eyes. That looked, I've seen it before, but not from her. She always had little doubt in her eyes, but she always looked at me as the master when we fought. She is looking at me like a equal now, and oh, she is looking at me the same way the great Hyuga Lord used to look at me. The way grandfather used to see me. Could she really have achieved the state of true inner peace? Naruto would have to done to her, he thought ominously. Hayashi gave her an almost sarcastic look and said, "I hope you don't think that now that you are a sage that you can beat me?" Hanabi smiled back at him and said, "I don't know if I can beat you, but I think I can hold my own against you." He nodded at her respectfully and returned to his defensive form. "Very well then, heiress of the Hyuga clan, show me how much you have improved." "Yes, father," she said with respect. Neither of them moved for a long moment. Neji asked quietly, "Is it safe to be this close to her when she's fighting?" "Yes, everything is fine," Naruto whispered back. "Byakugan!" Hanabi suddenly launched herself at her father with a graceful series of strikes with blinding speed. He held her at bay as they clashed again and again. They both landed strikes on each other when they had stopped. Hayashi had hit her in the shoulder and she had hit on him in the forearm. "She got 3 of my chakra points and I only grazed 1 of hers," he thought as he jumped back from her. She continued to charge him and he grabbed her arm while using her forward momentum to throw her behind him. She summoned a pocket of wind behind her and jumped down at him from midair. She summoned the wind behind her to leap back at him from midair? That would be hard to do in just training, let alone a fight, and she did it with ease. "Naruto, what have you done to her? She a totally different shinobi now," Neji thought soullessly. "Rotation!" he yelled as he spun while releasing a tremendous amount of chakra with perfect control that shook the dojo. Hanabi hit his 20 feet wide sphere of chakra and was thrown to the other side of the room. She spun wildly for a second and then righted herself in flight. She landed on her feet on the far wall and waited until just before he dropped his rotation before launching herself at him again. She went right under one of his swing arms as he stopped his rotation. She ended up behind him facing away from him in a couching pose with one arm fully extended in front of her and the other pointing back at her father. She had her middle and pointer finger on the back of his neck at the spine. She didn't force any chakra into him though. No way, she outflanked him. Not even Might Guy or Rock Lee has been able to do that before. Neji thought in shock. A sad and disappointed look crossed her face as she said, "Father, you held back and you already had 4 of your chakra points sealed during your sparring with Neji." Hayashi wore a tense look as Hanabi pulled her hand away from him. He was breathing hard as he turned around to face her. "You held back as well. I fully expected you to come charging at me with the Rasengan like Naruto would have done in his younger years," he said. "I still don't think I could beat you at the gentle fist if you weren't injured and didn't hold back," she said while looking at the floor. "Well, let's say with your current speed and control you really could hold your own against me. You really have changed," he said proudly. She smiled weakly back at him and said, "It's all thanks to Naruto's training." Hayashi looked back over at Naruto. He got up and walked over to Hanabi. He handed her the outer coat and sword. "Thank you for training her, Sage Naruto," he said respectfully. Naruto smiled honestly and said, "Thank you for letting me train her and letting me make her my disciple." Hanabi looked over at Naruto shyly. Hayashi turned back to her and said, "You're a sage now. As head of the clan, I need to see what kind of jutsu you know or capable of." She smiled knowingly at him and said, "Here, I will show you my greatest jutsu, but you have seen it used many times. She placed her hand on his forearm and he flinched slightly with worry. Green healing chakra flowed out of her hands and unsealed his chakra points. Hayashi gave her a curious look and asked, "Of all the jutsu you know, you consider this to be your greatest?" She nodded to him as she kept healing him. "Yes, father. Anyone can cause a wound, but it takes much more skill to close one. Just like when you told me before about how the clan leaders on the council fight with words, as it is preferable to weapons. The true path to peace is to understand one another, and for that combat jutsus is useless," she said with wisdom beyond her years. Hinata smiles at her and said, "And here I thought you were going to show us that you are the first person in our clan to be able to use the Rasengan." Hanabi looked over at her sister and said, "I don't know the Rasengan. Naruto didn't have time to teach me that one. I do know the principles of how it works though." Niji gave Naruto a curious look as said, "You really didn't teach her your signature jutsu?" He looked over at Niji and sighed. "No, I didn't. I had a limited time to teach her, so I had to prioritize which jutsus I taught her. Konohamaru already knows the Rasengan and can teach it to her if need be. I taught her other things that I felt were more important first, like medical ninjutsu," he said. Hanabi nodded at her master. "This is certainly different than what I expected in some ways. Then again, it is a nice change. Let us adjourn to another room and speak of your time away training, Hanabi," Hayashi said as he placed his hand on her shoulder to lead her away. "Hanabi, I have something I need to take care of. Why don't you catch up with your clan and I'll meet back with you later," Naruto said. Hanabi turned back to him and gave him a flat look. "What kind of things?" she asked in a warning manner. "While Hanabi just talked down to him like he's your kid or something, why don't you?" Hinata thought in surprise. He gave her a smile and said, "You'll know soon enough. It better not be anything dangerous," she stated sternly with her finger in front of her. Naruto rolled his eyes at her and said, "No, it's not anything dangerous. I'll be back in an hour to pick you up." She relaxed her stern look at him and said, "I'll see you then, master." Naruto arrived outside of Tintin's shop just before noon. He walked up to the door and went inside. The front room of her shop was nearly empty of weapons on the walls as he went up to the register and rang the bell. "I'm coming," she yelled from the other room. A moment later she walked into the gallery room wearing her leather coveralls. "Naruto? When did you get back?" she asked in surprise. "A few hours ago." "I know it's the busiest time of year for you, but I was hoping I could get something made," he asked with a strained look on his face. She gave him a flat, annoyed look. Naruto's strained look only worsened. "Let me guess, you have a date tonight?" She sighed loudly and said, "It seems like every time you ask for a favor is always the one time I set aside time for a date." She slumped her shoulders and sighed again. "What did you need made?" "Please understand I'm already swamped with orders for the holidays. I need to get a few of my special kunais made. I'd like to get 3 or 4 made if possible. If that is too much to ask, one would be okay for now," he asked her. She picked up her head and smiled evilly at him. "Oh, come on, Tintin, please don't overcharge me. I haven't been on a mission in over 8 months. I'm nearly broke as it is. I'm not made of money. Why do you think I send a clone fishing every day?" he said with a worried expression on his face. She only smiled bigger and turned around and went back into her forge. She returned a moment later with a 2 feet long, 1 foot wide black leather box. She set it on the counter and opened the box. Inside was 15 cobalt blue kunais without any runes on them. "I had a feeling that you would lose a few while you were gone, so I made another set. They just need the jutsu sealed in them," she said with a sly smile. I didn't lose any, and actually, I can't afford all of them right now. Can I buy 3 of them now and have you hold the rest for me to buy later?" he asked. She waved her hand at him and said, "Just take them all now, I know you're good for it." I'll even cut you a deal on the price. I'll only charge you 55,000 yen each. I only make 10,000 each on them that way. Naruto started counting on his fingers intently and then looked up to her and sadly said, Seriously, can I buy 3 of them now and try to buy the rest later? Tenten gave him a flat look and said, I know in 4 to 6 months you could do enough missions to pay for them. Why don't you just take them now? Naruto flinched and looked at the floor to the left of him solemnly. He swallowed hard and after a long moment he said, Because I don't think I have that long. Flashback. Naruto, Tenten and Neji were in Tenten's shop talking about remaking the Raijin sword. What I say here doesn't leave this room. They both nodded their heads with wide eyes. Naruto relaxed and sighed deeply as he looked into Tenten's eyes. I need this sword to fight the nine-tailed fox. They both looked like he had stolen their souls from them and looked at him blankly for many long moments. Yuri going to unseal Kyuubi? Why? Why would you do such a thing? Tenten said, nearly beside herself with anger and worry. I don't have much of a choice. The seal holding Kyuubi is weakening. Within 2 years it will break and Kyuubi will be set free. If I don't die when it escapes, then I will fight the nine-tailed fox, but to do that I need the Raijin sword repaired. Neji finally came out of his shock and said, So that's why you were willing to trade for your father's sword to get it repaired? He turned to Neji and said, Yes, now you understand why I'm so desperate to get it remade. Tenten looked at the floor with a very sad and confused look on her face. Flashback end. Tenten looked at him blankly for a long moment and then she leaned her head down and stared at the floor, unable to speak as her hair covered her face. Naruto. If you didn't lose any of your kunais, then who or what are these for? She asked carefully, almost regretting the answer before she heard it. He looked over her with sad resolve and softly said, They are for my disciple, Toad Sage Hanabi Hyuga. Tenten clutched her elbows as she hunched her shoulders down. I can't believe I ever thought to make a profit off of them. What kind of monster am I? She thought as she closed her eyes tightly, trying to force back her tears. She took in a long shaky breath and said, How long? He sighed sadly and said, I'm not sure. Tsunade is going to examine the seal tomorrow morning. Tenten gritted her teeth and shook her head at the floor, fighting back her tears. Don't play dumb with me. I already know you are the strongest master sealer in the village. You would know better than her. She yelled at him but refused to raise her head. After a very long moment he sighed again at her. He looked at her with sad resolve and said, At the rate the seal is decaying, 2 to 4 months as best I can tell. She could no longer hold back her tears as they broke through and slid down her face in silence. Really? That soon? She said hollowly. She sobbed quietly for many long moments. Naruto could only look at her with a soft look. She closed the black leather case and pushed it toward him. She lifted her head and showed him her tears raining down her face as she said, Take them. Naruto sighed and sincerely said, I'm sorry, I can't. I have to pay for them. Why? She yelled at him with more tears sliding down her cheeks. He sighed deeply and said, Because this is a gift from master to student. If you gave them to me it wouldn't be a gift from me. Please understand, as her master I want to do this for her. I have nothing of great value to offer you, so I will buy them as I can. She clutched her elbows and looked away from him. It was because of you I became a grandmaster weaponsmith, she said as she turned around and pointed to the green dragon scroll behind the counter. And now, you will not even let me repay you. Just the commission from one of the swords I'm making for a lord is enough to cover the cost of the kunais I made for you, she said as she turned her bloodshot eyes back at him. They are nearly worthless to anyone but you. I couldn't get 20,000 each for them even if I melted them down. Please take them. I'm feeling so guilty right now, she begged him with tears forming at the rims of her eyes again. He turned away from her painful look and said, I'm sorry, Tenten, but think how I feel as well. He turned to look of the lone window on the west wall of her shop at the dreary overcast sky. In his eyes was a slightly sad look that was fully of determination. I've watched a student that was the complete opposite of what I needed in a student trained for 14 hours a day and most demanding of training just to become what I needed. He closed his eyes and shook his head in gratefulness and quiet awe as he remembered. He opened his eyes and stared out the window as he said, "Words will never express how thankful I am to her. During our training she showed more grit and courage to keep going than Rock Lee. She learned at a rate that I'm not sure if even Shikamaru could keep up with. And most importantly, I never heard her complain, not even once. As a master she has humbled me beyond words. She knew she was ill-suited to become my disciple, and yet she made herself suited for it just because that is what I needed. For all that she has done for me, this is the least I can do for her." Resolve shone clearly in his eyes. Tintin looked down at the black leather box on her glass counter. She knew now that it didn't matter what she said. Naruto wouldn't take the kunais unless he paid for them himself. She let go of her elbows and shook away the tears in her eyes. She took a long ragged breath and softly said in defeat, "Fine then, let's get to work sealing all of them and get it out of the way. I'll hold the other 12 for you until you can come up with the rest of the money or until I can find another buyer." He smiled weakly and said, "Who is going to want to buy spirit markers already attuned to someone else's chakra? No one, that's who. They just melt them down and sell the steel." She picked up the box and turned around and walked into her forge as he followed her. "I take it you already have some of her chakra and blood?" she asked as she set the box down on her workbench and took out one of the kunais. He reached into his overcoat and pulled out a small ornate crystal vial of blood. He set on the table and then pulled out a fist-sized quartz crystal. She looked over at the items he had placed on the table and said, "I'm not surprised you got the blood, but how did you get her to give you so much chakra without telling her what it was for?" "That crystal is humming with chakra," she said as she held it in her hand. He smiled at her and said, "I got her to do a chakra training exercise where I had her concentrate her chakra on that crystal for 5 weeks. She mastered the lesson and I had her chakra for making her kunais. It was a win-win for both of us." She rolled her eyes at him and said, "Why am I not surprised you used a training exercise to get her chakra? Well, let's get started. I'm all ready." Behind is. Naruto was greeted at the door of the Hyuga's main house by the butler and was quickly sent inside. He went through the short hall that led to the main living room of the house. Nearly the entire clan was seated there listening quietly to Hanabi, Neji, Hinata, and Lord Hyuga talk. Hanabi had broken the conversation a moment before Naruto opened the door. She was already looking over at the door just before he opened it. "Hello, master," she said respectfully and bowed her head. The rest of the clan besides those he named as friends followed suit. She has that same ability he has where he knows where someone is before they show themselves. "I see, this must be the power of a sage," Hayashi thought. Hanabi picked her head up from her standing bow and gave him an annoyed look. "You are 2 hours late," she said sharply. He smiled meekly at her and said, "Sorry. Things took a bit long than I thought they would." She sighed loudly and said, "You are just like Kakashi-sensei, never on time." He chuckled softly and said, "I'm not nearly as bad as he is. Are you ready to go?" Neji turned to him and said, "You don't want to stay and catch up with everyone?" He gave him a disappointed look and said, "Yes, I do, but we have things we need to take care of first." "I see. Before you go, Naruto, I would like to invite you to join in the Hyuga clan's holiday party on the night of the winter solstice. I know that you have been holding your own party in recent years, but seeing as you were away training Hanabi, I didn't think you had time to set one up this year. I've already invited your friends to come as well," Lord Hyuga said respectfully. Naruto gave him a smile and said, "Thanks, Hayashi. I think we will take you up on that offer." Hayashi nodded as Hanabi walked over to him and put on her black traveling cloak. "We will see you then." Naruto said with a wave, and then both of them stepped outside just as the first snowflakes of winter lazily floated to the ground. Hanabi shivered under her cloak and said, "Where are we going? It's freezing out here and I can't wait to get home and take a hot shower." Naruto smiled over at her as they walked and said, "You'll see." They traveled across the village as the gentle snow turned into a blizzard. The snowstorm raged as they arrived at a small white house with red trim. Naruto went to knock as a voice sounded from other side. "Please come in, the door is open, Naruto." Naruto opened the door and held it for Hanabi. She wrapped her cloak around her tightly as they quickly went inside the dark house. Naruto followed her inside and shut the door. The sounds of the raging gale was muffled but could still be heard. Sasuke turned on the lights and sat down at the humble table. Naruto was shaking the snow off of his clothes as he hung Hanabi's traveling cloak up on the hanger behind the door. "I'm sorry, but you will have to wait for the water to boil before I have the tea ready. I wasn't expecting you today. At least not yet, that is," he said as he rested his arms on the table. When Hanabi had finally shaken off the numbness in her limbs from the cold, she turned to Naruto and asked curiously, "Why did we need to weather this storm to see Sasuke?" Naruto took a seat at the other side of the table and said, "Because I told him I would tell me everything when we got back." Hanabi carefully eyed the bandages over his eyes and took a seat next to Naruto. "She is very different from the last time we met, Naruto. At least she isn't trying to attack me," he said with a soft chuckle. "Well, let's hear the news, even though I'm pretty sure I already know what you are about to tell me." Sasuke folded his hands together on the table. Hanabi timidly took a seat next to Naruto. Naruto spoke seriously. "She has completed her sage training. I've taught her what I know about healing ninjutsu. Truth be told, she's better at it than me." Sasuke nodded his head and said, "I figured she would do well with healing ninjutsu. And what of your father's sword? Did she even earn that from you?" Naruto grinned at him as Hanabi looked down in embarrassment. "Yes, she mastered it just before we left Mount Maiboku to return home." "I see," he said as he turned to Hanabi. "You certainly are impressive, Hyuga heiress. Now you really are Naruto's disciple." Hanabi blinked blankly at him, clearly surprised at his compliment. Thank you," she replied awkwardly. "I felt Konohamaru's chakra this morning as well." "How has your apprentice been coming along?" he asked quietly. Naruto gave him a sour look and said, "Very well, actually." Sasuke chuckled softly at him. "Are you still sore about losing him to the Monkey Clan?" he asked, clearly amused. Naruto sighed and tilted his head toward the table. "It's not so much that. It is just they actually got him to do the one thing I never seemed to be able to get through his thick skull. They got him to start using his head. I guess it was a bit of a hit to my ego. He is totally different now. He thinks a lot more before he acts. He's nearly nothing like the ninja I trained him to be, yet he is still the same in some ways." Sasuke grinned at him. "I remember Kakashi saying something similar about you when you came back to the village after being trained by Master Jiraiya. One master can't teach everything perfectly. I take it he also obtained the rank of sage?" he said. Naruto smiled again at him and said, "You're darn right he did. He is my apprentice after all." Both Hanabi and Sasuke laughed. After a long cheerful moment, things settled down and got suddenly serious. Sasuke picked up his hands and started going through some odd hand signs. Hanabi's eyes went wide and she instinctively snapped her sword out in front of her. Sasuke continued his hand signs, clearly unfazed by her drawing her weapon. "What of the connection you two share? Has it faded or gotten stronger?" he signed to Naruto. Hanabi blinked blankly at Naruto as he started making hand signs back at him. "It has only gotten stronger. I haven't used the raw chakra transfer on her in over 6 months, yet it still keeps getting stronger. She has even drawn on my chakra a few times when her training was at its most intense. I see, so you two are truly linked even now. To think the connection has developed to that degree." What of the Kyuubi's chakra? Has that had any effect on her? Sasuke signed back to him. Hey! I get what's going on here, Hanabi said in offense. Kyuubi and I have an agreement. She doesn't let her chakra flow into Hanabi. Naruto signed back. Sasuke turned back to Hanabi and said, You may know nearly as much about Naruto as me, but there are still some things you aren't ready to hear yet. She scowled at him and then turned her scowl to Naruto. You know you aren't supposed to keep secrets from me now that I'm your disciple. She warned him through gritted teeth. Sasuke and Naruto both chuckled. I guess from the way she just talked to you that you both are still pretending to be dating. Hanabi's angry scowl instantly faded to a look of pain as she looked away at the floor. Naruto calmly said, Yes, we are. It's better for both of us this way. My fangirls don't bother me anymore and she will not get suitors trying to court her into marriage. Sasuke laughed softly. I believe you are right. I doubt anyone would try to take Hanabi from you unless they wanted to get beaten into the ground by her. Hanabi blushed slightly and refused to look up. It was a bright, clear morning in the Leaf Village. The snow had started to pile up on Naruto's bedroom window as light poured into his bedroom. Naruto was trying to stay asleep in his singles bed, but the light persisted in waking him up. Against his will he groggily opened his eyes and peered around his blurry bedroom. After staring blankly for some time he sat up and something fell off his chest onto his lap. He looked down and saw a familiar arm. He looked beside his bed and saw Hanabi sleeping in a ball next to his bed and bedstand. She had a blanket wrapped around her and one of her arms was resting in Naruto's lap. He looked at her kindly. You couldn't stay away, huh, Hanabi? He thought as he ran his fingers through her silky brown hair. He took a deep breath. I'd forgotten that smell. Honey and grass clippings, it must be the shampoo she uses. He thought as he watched her sleep. Naruto heard sound of eggs frying from the kitchen and his stomach growled loudly. Hanabi's stomach returned the growl and Naruto covered his mouth to try and not laugh out loud. Naruto got out of bed. He was wearing boxer shorts, a yellow tank top and his panda nightcap. He gently shook her shoulder to wake her. She stirred and lifted her hand out from under the brown wool blanket to rub the sleep out of her eyes. He softly said, Why aren't you in your bed? You shouldn't sleep on the floor. She clearly wasn't totally awake and said, Because I was cold upstairs. Naruto rolled his eyes at her knowing full well that the fluff monster bed in her room was the warmest in the house. He walked over to his closet and selected a heavy sage uniform made for cold weather. He tossed it onto the bed and took off his top and cap. Hanabi stood up and wrapped the blanket tighter around her. He grabbed his white pants and was just stepping into the leg as the door to his bedroom opened. A thin Hyuga with brown hair pulled up into a bun was standing in the doorway with a cheery smile and said, Breakfast is ready. She stopped in mid-sentence as her milky white eyes went wide with shock. Naruto finished putting on his pants and looked over to her. He calmly stated, We will be there shortly, Shizen. Hanabi! What are you doing in Naruto's room while he's getting dressed? She nearly shouted at her. She looked over at her and blinked a few times before saying, What do you mean? She said, clearly not seeing a problem. I've seen him in his boxer shorts loads of times. We have been living in a single-room hut for 8 months. Shizen's face went blank with thought as she eyed Hanabi wrapped in the blanket and then stared Naruto's muscular frame up and down. They are getting dressed together like this is normal. What will Lord Hyuga think if he finds out about this? They have been living together in such close quarters for so long. She thought blankly as she eyed Naruto's shirtless chest. There is no way Hanabi could keep her hands off of him for long, that much I'm certain. Hanabi, I don't know how you live with the Toad clan, but when you are home I expect you to act like a lady. You are not to be in his room when he is getting dressed, she said sharply. Naruto rolled his eyes at her as he put on his black long-sleeve undershirt. Hanabi gave her a flat look and sarcastically said, I'm not the one eyeballing him and blushing, Shizen. Shizen's eyes widened slight as she realized that she was obviously staring. She quickly turned her blushing cheeks away and said, "Breakfast is on the table." She left down the hall swiftly. Naruto, Hanabi and Shizen were eating breakfast a short while later. Shizen is lecturing Hanabi and Hanabi clearly was tuning her out. "I can't believe you would sneak into his room and sleep next to him like that. Have you no dignity as a lady?" she said. Naruto finished his second egg and said, "Good luck trying to get her to stop that. Even the elders gave up and put our sleeping blankets right next to each other. The first night we stayed there I was sleeping next to Fukasaku and she was sleeping on the other side of the room next to Shima. She got up and kicked Fukasaku out of his sleeping area and slept next to me in her sleep. Shima got a laugh when she saw us the next morning, but Fukasaku wasn't too happy about it." Shizen stared blankly at Hanabi as she ate. "What are we doing today, master?" Hanabi asked him, quickly changing the subject. Naruto shrugged casually and said, "What else? Training, of course. I thought we would knock off early today so you can go shopping for the holidays." She casually replied, "I guess that's a good idea. I've already asked Hinata and Niji what they wanted." Naruto raised an eyebrow at her and carefully asked, "Really, and what did they ask for?" She gave him a flat look and said, "You better not try to steal my idea for their gifts," she warned him. Niji asked for a healing herb mixture and Hinata asked for a rare training manual. "I'll get some dried herbs and make Niji's gift. I will see what I can find at the bookstore for my sister," she said. Naruto nodded his head silently and then picked up his empty plate. He took it to the kitchen as Hanabi followed him. They headed out the front door a moment later. It was a clear cold day and there was nearly an inch of snow on the ground from yesterday's storm. They slowly picked their way over to the Hyuga training ground. The small fish pool had frozen over and there was snow covering the trees. Konohamaru was sitting on an open patch of grass that had been cleared of snow. He was sitting crossed-legged while meditating. "Good morning, you two." Konohamaru opened his eyes and said, "Morning, Konohamaru. I see you beat us to training again." Hanabi said, "Hello, Konohamaru. What are you working on today?" Naruto asked. Konohamaru quickly got to his feet and pointed at him. "You know very well what jutsu I want you to teach me. Don't play dumb with me. I'm a sage now, so teach me the Raisin Shuriken," he said loudly. Hanabi laughed and said, "There's the old Konohamaru I knew." Naruto smiled at him and said, "What is your main element?" "Fire, so what do I do to combine it into the Rasengan?" he asked intently. "I can't explain that part too well. You just have to keep trying until you've gotten it, but first before you try that you need to learn to throw the Rasengan. Monkey Sage Chakra and Toad Sage Chakra is different, so you will have to figure out that part on your own as well." Konohamaru face planted and then quickly got to his feet and pointed an angry quivering finger at him. "What? After all this sage training you basically told me to figure it out myself. Kami, what was all that training for then?" he yelled angrily. "To get you ready to try it. You have to figure this out on your own, Konohamaru. My wind-released Raisin Shuriken is different than your fire-released Raisin Shuriken is going to be. You are creating a jutsu here. No one can tell you how to do it because no one has created it yet," Naruto told him empathetically. "You kidding, right? You have to be able to give me some kind of idea," Konohamaru said in disbelief. Naruto smiled at him and said, "Well, I wouldn't be much of a master if I couldn't. No one said I wouldn't be helping you, but you will have to learn to throw the Rasengan on your own. Once you master that, I'll be able to help you with the jutsu." Konohamaru eyed him carefully for a long moment. He spoke to himself out loud with a curious look on his face. "Throw the Rasengan, huh? But how? It's already insanely hard to form it, and the farther away it gets from the user, the harder it will to keep the jutsu going." Hanabi smiled and put up the seal of the tiger. "Multi-shadow clone jutsu." 8 clones appeared. 2 sat down and meditated, and the rest started sparring with each other. Naruto smiled big as he put up his own seal of the tiger and said, "Man, it is going to feel good to get in some real training after all that time on the road." Multi-shadow clone Jet Kakashi appeared next to him and caught his forearm. "Naruto," Kakashi said carefully. Naruto looked over at him with an awkward look and said, "Eh? Hey Kakashi-sensei, what's the matter?" Kakashi raised an eyebrow at him and said, "Did you forget anything this morning?" Naruto looked up in thought and turned back to him. "Nope. I've got all my stuff and my 2 students are here to train with me." Kakashi let go of his arm and gave him a fake smile as he said, "Well, if you're sure about that." Naruto looked suddenly changed to a cringe. He turned to Hanabi and said, "Quick, what time is it?" She checked her watch and said, "It's just after 9:30. Naruto's shoulders slumped and let out a long sigh. "Great, Tsunade is probably about ready to kill me for being over an hour late." Kakashi nodded his head. "I'll be back later, you too. It might not be until after lunch though. Don't stay out shopping too long, Hanabi," he said, and then drew one of his kunais. He disappeared without a noise. Konohamaru was lost on concentration and didn't even notice Kakashi talking to Naruto. He summoned a clone and preformed the Rasengan. He held his hand back and threw it. When it was 3 inches from his head, it dissipated. "Kami! This is going to be tough. Oh, hi Kakashi. What brings you out here?" Kakashi was eyeing him carefully the whole time he tried to throw the jutsu. Kakashi carefully asked, "Konohamaru, did you just try to throw the Rasengan?" Konohamaru smiled innocently while scratching the back of his head and said, "Yeah, I guess I did." "So Naruto is teaching that jutsu?" he asked slowly. Konohamaru said, "Well, kind of. He told me I need to learn to throw the Rasengan first." "Say, you helped Naruto create the Rasen Shuriken, did you? Can you give me any idea how he learned how to throw it?" Kakashi wore a strained look and held his hands up in front of him. "I only taught him the basics of elemental jutsu and got him to try infusing his wind element into the Rasengan. I never saw how he learned to throw it. He learned that by himself during his sage training." Konohamaru sighed as he turned back around and tried to throw it again. "When Tsunade learns about this, she really is going to kill him. I think I'll wait until after the holidays to tell her for Naruto's sake," he thought with a very strained look. "Hey Kakashi-sensei. I've got a few questions about elemental jutsu," Hanabi said as her clones fought. Kakashi perked up and wore a curious expression. "What questions would those be?" Hanabi wore a confused look and said, "When Naruto taught me medical ninjutsu, I had to use the water element. It took me a while, but I got it. He also tried to teach me some earth jutsu, but I failed miserably at it. I don't mean to disrespect him, but I am starting to think that neither of them are my main element." Kakashi was eyeing her very intently as she spoke. "Well, I doubt Naruto had any of these with him when you went away training." He reached into his pack and pulled out 5 slips of paper. "You are lucky I was carrying some today. I had to make a stop at the academy and test a student this morning." Hanabi gave him a curious look and slowly asked, "What is paper going to do for me?" If it were just normal paper, then it would do nothing. These are chakra slips." He handed her one and she looked at unbelievingly. "Just run some chakra through it and I'll tell you your main element." He laid the slip of paper in her open palm and ran her chakra through it. Kakashi looked down at her hand. "Your main element is..." He did a few hand signs and preformed the Chidori. "Lightning, the second rarest of the 5 elements. The first is wind. This means that you likely lean the farthest away from Earth. It's no wonder you failed at Earth. Water is likely your 3rd element, maybe even your 4th. He said as he stared down at the crumpled slip of paper and released his jutsu. She stared at him blankly for a long moment and then said, "Wait, my main element is lightning? And what's this about water being my 3rd element?" He looked at her and pulled out a diagram of the 5 elements that had arrows pointing to what each element was strong to. "Everyone has a main element that their chakra leans towards. For you it's lightning," he said as he pointed to the yellow symbol for lightning. "Lightning is strong versus Earth. This means your chakra likely leans the farthest from Earth. Most shinobi tend to go backwards 2 elements on this chart, and that's normally their second element. For you we go back 2 elements, we skip over wind and end up a fire on the chart. Fire is likely your second element. It gets less precise for your third element. Most of the time you just go back 1 more element. In your case, that is water. Your fourth element is likely wind, but this is only an example. Truth be told, your second element could be wind. I'm only explaining how people normally progress out from their main element," he explained while pointing at the diagram. She looked at him hopefully and said, "Wind could be my second element? I'd really like to have it be wind after seeing what Master Naruto can do with it." Kakashi chuckled softly. "After seeing what he can do with it, I wish I had the wind element as well. But I have to tell you that I believe your second element is fire, not wind." She gave him a curious expression and asked, "Why do you think that?" Do you remember our first mission together?" he asked her. She wore a thoughtful expression before saying, "Yeah, the one where you and Naruto had me learn survival training. That seems like such a long time ago." Kakashi nodded his head and asked her, "I know you were tired at the time and you may not remember it well. But do you remember when Naruto asked you to make a fire?" She thought about it and said, "I vaguely remember that." Kakashi asked her, "Had you ever made a fire that way before?" "No, not really. I had read about how to do it in a book though," she said as she shook her head. "Hanabi, did you know that the final test before being sent out into the wilds to live for a week at the academy is to build a fire?" Kakashi said. She looked over at him and said, "How is that a good test?" "It's easy to make a fire." He smiled at her and said, "It takes months for most ninjas to get decent at building a fire with a flint and tinder. You, however, had a fire going in less than 2 minutes on your first try. If your second element is fire, then this explains why you find it easy to make a fire." She gave him a slightly sour expression and said, "You really think my second element is fire?" He shrugged. "It's just a hunch." "Did you have any other questions?" he asked. She looked at him curiously and asked, "How many elements can you use?" "4. I'm a master at lightning and I can use earth, fire, and water as well. Only the rarest of the elements is out of my reach, the wind. I'm not known as the copy ninja for nothing." "Wait, if you can use 4, does that mean the Hokage can use all 5? She asked intently. Kakashi laughed for a moment and said, "No, Tsunade can only use 3 elements. Her main element is earth, though most people don't know that as she focuses her time on medical ninjutsu. Her other 2 are water and lightning. The one she uses the most is water, as the human body is made up of mostly water." She got a confused look on her face and asked, "Wait, isn't the Hokage stronger than you?" "I mean, to be Hokage she has to be the strongest in the village, right?" Kakashi smiled at her kindly. "Not all strength is measured in our elemental jutsu. Yes, she is far stronger than me, but if you are referring strongest in combat, then I think you already know who holds that title," he said suggestively. Hanabi thought about it. "Ergai-sensei?" she said, clearly just guessing. Kakashi's sweat dropped. "Guy? Of all the people she could have picked, why did she choose my one-sided rival?" he thought in disbelief. "And no, it's not Guy. Care to try that again?" he said with a strained look. She thought about it again and suddenly winced or rubbed her forehead. "Please tell me she isn't going to say his name next," he thought with an even more strained look. "Maybe Rock Lee?" she said with a confused and reserved look. Kakashi's sweat dropped again and put his head in his hands. "Naruto, how did you manage to turn her into a sage and steal her intelligence away too?" He let go of his head and looked at her. "Hanabi, that you do know the 2 people on Tsunade's list of successors, right?" Her eyes suddenly lit up and she felt very foolish. "Oh! Sorry, I'm around him all the time that I guess I just forgot he's so powerful," she said as she looked down at the ground in embarrassment. After a long uncomfortable moment she asked him, "Hey Kakashi, has there ever been anyone that could use all 5 of the basic elements?" He looked over at her and said, "Yes, I've met someone that could use all 5, but he was using a forbidden jutsu to do it." "Really? I bet he was a very powerful ninja," she said in awe. He nodded his head and said, "Yes, Kakuzu was very powerful and nearly killed me." She stared at him blankly. "He nearly killed you? What happened?" she asked intently. "Miino and Choji fought him and were on the losing end, barely hold out on against him. He was about to rip out my heart when Naruto showed up. He had just perfected the jutsu Konohamaru is trying to learn. Naruto killed him using his Rasen Shuriken," he said. Flashback. It was a cool and cloudless spring morning at Mount Maiboku. Naruto and Hanabi were standing in an open field with mountain tops in the distance. 3 of the mountains had the tops cut off of them. Hanabi was beside herself with excitement. She smiled joyfully at him and said, "I can wait to see this. I've only read about it." He smiled back at her and said, "There is a reason for that and it will become obvious after you see it. Sheesh, we finally get here and at first light you remind me of my promise." She bit her lips together innocently. "Sorry master, I've been thinking about it for the whole trip here." He gave her a slight chuckle and said, "I know. I hope you are ready for this. You might want to cover your ears." She lightly covered her ears while smiling. Naruto summoned 2 clones. He and one of the clones summoned the Rasengan in his hand. The third added the wind element. The more the clone added the wind element, the louder it grew. The sound was defying. It sounded like metal being sheared away at high speed. Naruto held the jutsu over his head and yelled through the screaming sound, "Here it is! This the wind released, Rasen Shuriken. Now I will show you why you have never seen me perform it before." He stepped back and hurled the massive amount of spinning chakra with all his might. It screamed across the plains just above the grass and rose just as it came to the mountains. It hit the center of one of the larger peaks and exploded into giant blue ball of countless tiny attacks. The ground shook violently as the top of the mountain was obliterated in the span of 3 heartbeats. When it was over, the top of the mountain was cut clean off and the top of the mountain was smoking like a volcano that just erupted. Hanabi was shocked to her core as she stared blankly at the place where the mountain was a moment again. No one could ever survive a hit from that jutsu, not even the Hokage. No wonder he never uses it, she thought soullessly. Naruto looked over at her and said, "Now do you see why I never use this jutsu?" End of flashback. She blinked at him a few times. He was really so strong that Naruto had to use his most powerful attack on him? She asked in disbelief. Kakashi eyed her curiously and said, "You think that the Rasen Shuriken is his most powerful attacks? I hope you know he was 16 when he created it. Naruto had only gotten strong over the years." She stared at him blankly and asked, "He has even stronger jutsu?" Kakashi nodded his head. "As for your question about someone that could use all 5 basic elements by themselves without a forbidden jutsu to aid them, there is one told of in legend. Naruto might have already told you about him." She looked at him curiously. "Who was he?" "Naruto has told you about his finally battle that ended the 4th Great Shinobi War, right?" he asked her. She nodded at him. "Then you know about the 10-tailed beast Jubi?" he asked. She nodded again. "Did he tell you who it was that sealed the 10-tailed beast in himself thousands of years ago?" She struggled with her memories and finally said, "Rikudo, right? He was the moon sage, correct?" "Yes, he was. He possessed the most powerful eye technique, the Rinnegan. It is said that whoever has the Rinnegan can learn any jutsu after seeing it once, no matter the element. It is said that the first ninja that ever created ninjutsu had these eyes. They are likely talking about the moon sage Rikudo if he existed," he said. She scrunched up her face in thought and then asked, Was Rakuto said to have been a priest? Kakashi tilted his head slightly and eyed her very intently. He carefully asked, "Why would you ask that?" She held her head, trying to remember everything about what she had seen. "Because the first time I was in Naruto's bedroom I saw a weird elemental diagram. At the bottom of it said High Priest Saki Rakuto something jutsu. Sorry, I couldn't read two of the characters," she said. Kakashi eyed her in a very reserved manner and asked, "I don't suppose you could explain what the diagram looked like? It hurt my head to even look at it, but I think I can write down part of it if you will give me that elemental diagram you have," Hanabi said as she pointed to the paper in his hand. He looked at his hand and then handed her the paper. She sat down near the tree where Naruto used to refill her chakra. She took out a book to write on and an ink brush. She began adding to his diagram. She drew a yin-yang symbol in the center of the 5 elements. She drew a tree in between the elements of water and earth. She then drew arrows from the tree and the wind to the fire element. She drew a line around the fire to make it look like it was getting bigger. "Here," she said as she handed it to him. "This is what I remember of it. There was weird combination for all the elements like that. All the ones for lightning were blank though. The only thing I could understand about it at the time was you could use water and earth to make wood. You could add wood and wind to fire to make it stronger, at least if I understand it right." Kakashi looked it over. That is exactly what this means, but how could this alone be a jutsu?" he said in thought. He suddenly smiled at her and said, "I'll let you get back to your training." He held up his hand and poofed into smoke. Hanabi said, "Well, he made a quick exit." Konohamaru hit the ground panting on all fours. "Damn. I forgot how much chakra the Rasengan takes to use." She suddenly looked over at Konohamaru and said, "Maybe you should take a break." Konohamaru rolled over on his back breathing hard and said, "Maybe you're right." A short while later Konohamaru was sitting next to a tree. Hanabi was sitting while resting her elbow on her knees near him. Konohamaru suddenly broke the silence. "I didn't have time to ask you before, but how are things with you and Naruto? I mean, I haven't even seen you two holding hands. I hope you guys didn't break up or anything." Hanabi looked changed to one of pain as they wrapped her arms around her knees, a buried face in them. "Gaara told me this would be hard. I never expected it would be this hard though," she said with her voice cracking. "Gaara said?" he asked her. She nodded her head on her knees. "You have no idea how much I want to have a normal relationship with him. To just say I love you or share a real kiss with him, but it can't happen right now. Our relationship as master and student is closer than ever. But..." She stopped, clearly fighting with herself not to cry. She took several deep breaths before she continued again. "But our relationship as boyfriend and girlfriend is so strained. It's so difficult," she said, the frustration and pain in her voice shone through clearly. "He tells me he cares by teaching me and I tell him that I love him by mastering as many jutsu as I can. To just want him to tell me to show me how he really feels, but as long as he is a Jinchuriki." 8 months of mistakes flooded her mind when she had pushed things too far. 8 months of Naruto's pained looks came back to her at once. She saw his pained looks again and again in her mind. In front of her greatest friend and fellow pupil, Hanabi could no longer hold back her tears. She sobbed uncontrollably as she gripped her knees tightly with her head buried on top of them. Konohamaru didn't need sage chakra to know exactly how she felt and what she was going through her thoughts. With a look of kindness and understanding, her walked over to her and tried to pull one of her arms away from her knees. She jerked her arm back as she continued to cry. He forcibly opened her arms and embraced her. She gripped him tightly as she trembled and tears forced their way out of her shut eyes. She went from sobbing to wailing like a baby. "I'm so sorry Naruto, your Nindo is so hard to keep," she said while crying. Konohamaru understood her perfectly and ran his hand over her head and down her back with an empathetic look on his face. It's okay, Hanabi. I understand that others don't see you for who you really are. They see you as the heiress to the Hyuga clan or Demon Fist Hanabi or even Toad Sage Hanabi, Naruto's disciple. I'll never see you that way. I see you as a trusted comrade. I see you as a 16-year-old girl that is madly in love with Naruto. I see that you will do anything for him even if it means hurting yourself or becoming his disciple. So let it all out. If you need a shoulder to cry on, then use mine. I'll never judge you, he said honestly as he grabbed her tightly. She cried and cried for what seemed like forever to him. Hanabi. If we ever truly fought, I don't know who would win, but I have to give you this. I could never bear the burden that you bear for Naruto. Not in 1,000 years could I bear the terrible pain you are going through. You are by far the strongest girl I know, maybe even stronger than Naruto. He thought as he held Hanabi tightly as she cried on his shoulder. Something strange suddenly happened to Konohamaru. Something Naruto told him many times would one day happen, but he never fully understood his wise words until this moment. Flashback. Naruto and Konohamaru were training out in a remote field. They were practicing the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Naruto sighed and looked at the ground. Hey boss, you don't need to be so down about not being able to bring Sasuke back. I mean, he left willingly. He's a rogue ninja now. Why would you stick your neck out for him? Naruto smiled meekly at him and said, one day you will have a bond like the one I share with Sasuke. One day you will find your true equal in battle and you will understand them fully from the first time you fight them. It is only then you will have found your true rival. Konohamaru smiled arrogantly as he pointed at Naruto. I already have a rival and that's you, he yelled. He smiled weakly and said, it's true we're rivals in our quest to become Hokage, but I'd still beat you in a fight. You only think you can beat me. Bring it on! I'm the grandson of the third Hokage. He yelled childishly as he rubbed the underside of his nose with his finger. Naruto looked at him curiously and said, oh really, multi-shadow clone jutsu? Over 200 Narutos appeared. Konohamaru stared around and shook. Hey! I didn't know you could summon that many. He yelled loudly while backpedaling nervously. They encircled him, cutting off his escape route. Well, are you ready, rival? He said with a sly smile. Konohamaru wore a blank look as all the Naruto clone charged him. End of flashback. Master. He desperately gripped Hanabi with all his strength. I see now that I never saw Moegi or Udon as my equal. I never saw them as my teammates. I was always stronger than them. I was always their leader, chasing after you just like everyone else did. He thought as he winched, his eyes closed in pain and clutched the crying Hyuga closer to him. Tears that were not his own formed at the rims of his shut eyes. Is this what you heard for all those years? Is this the kind of bond you two shares? Did you hear Sasuke's soul screaming from the depths of despair and darkness like the way I hear Hanabi's soul screaming for you now? Is this what he means to truly understand someone else? Is this that it feels like to have a true rival? I had no idea how powerful it was. I understand why you never gave up on Sasuke now. It's because you couldn't bear hear his soul screaming like the way I hear Hanabi's. Konohamaru felt Hanabi's sorrow as only a rival could. He opened his liquid deep brown eyes and helped her shed tears with pride. Tears rolled down his face in the freezing cold as he finally understood his master teaching about what bonds with a rival really meant.
That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.